Chapter 21:19. Doctor, this is very risky. Zero's consciousness is blank, you can be swallowed if you're not careful. This experiment has been done before, several people's consciousnesses were swallowed by Zero and turned into idiots. No, doctor, let others go, you don't have to go. After all, Wei Bai was the core leader of the experimental base. Although those superpowered people wanted nothing more than to kill her. But the scientists admired her very much. Without her, the superpowered experiment would not have succeeded. Even if Zero's plan failed, the success of the other 7 superpowered people. It was enough for their experimental base to survive in the apocalypse with pride. There was more than one survival base for humans. So far, only their base had superpowered people who had succeeded in the experiment. Most of the credit went to Wei Bai. Wei Bai straightforwardly stuck some equipment links to her forehead and said coldly, "Shut up, when is it up to you to deny my decision?" She was the one who had the final say here. She would do whatever she said. Sure enough, as soon as this sentence was spoken, everyone obediently shut up and didn't dare to make a sound. Wei Bai closed the hibernation chamber, closed her eyes and said to the system, "If my consciousness is swallowed, remember to guide me back." The system said, "Don't worry, this is easy." Zero was a very dangerous existence. Wei Bai had the system, so she was a little more confident. In the hall, in the huge glass culture tank, the huge egg floated quietly. The source of life was sent into Zero's eggshell through the delivery tube of the nutrient solution. A few scientists were already busy. Pay attention to the activation program. Has the doctor's consciousness entered? Yes. Okay, when necessary, forcibly stop the experiment. We can't let the doctor's consciousness be swallowed. Okay, everyone pay attention, make sure there is enough nutrient solution. Observe the consciousness activation program data. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. When Wei Bai closed her eyes to sleep, she immediately entered a white hazy place. It was boundless, it was white everywhere. There were no animals or plants, no sky or earth. It was just white. Wei Bai rubbed her chin speechlessly. This target. Could he be an idiot? His brain was actually white? Wei Bai flipped through the information from scratch. It seemed that there was nothing special in the beginning. It was just a simple fertilized egg fusion. Then, the fertilized egg was injected with the strongest and most powerful superpower fluid in history. Other espers would probably only be able to identify 1 or 2 types of esper fluid. In the end, if he succeeded, he would only activate one ability. But the original owner had a crazy idea. She wanted to create a psychic with many abilities. However, the human body was too fragile. Even if it had been strengthened, it would not be able to withstand the ravages of so many different abilities. Therefore, the original owner injected Zero with the blood of the king of monsters, an invincible Vajra that could command all monsters. Back then he had tried everything he could, but he had only managed to make the Monster King lose a little bit of HP. This little bit of HP was all given to Zero. He did not expect that Zero, who was injected with the monster's blood, would turn from a viviparous embryo to an egg. No matter how much nutrients it was given, the egg only grew bigger. But it was still an egg. Not to mention an ability, there was not even a crack in the eggshell. Wei Bai walked in the white space for a long time and felt that it was about time. Should I come again next time? Chapter 21:20. This damned place felt like it wouldn't be finished even if one walked for 100 years. No wonder some people became idiots, because it was easy to get lost in this place. Wei Bai was about to call out to the system when she suddenly heard the sound of bouncing. Under her feet, there was also a slight tremor. It was as if the earth was trembling. Wei Bai frowned and looked down at her feet. On the white ground, something like a tree root suddenly appeared. Countless tree roots trembled slightly as she followed these root-like things forward. The bouncing sound became more and more obvious. It sounded like the sound of a huge heartbeat. Wei Bai's mind was a little muddled as she was seduced by this sound. It was clearly just the sound of a heartbeat. But it was like a sweet song that she had never heard before. It was full of temptation, depravity, darkness, mystery, and irresistible happiness. Wei Bai vaguely heard it. "Come here, let me hug you. Come here, my girl." Her eyes lost focus as if she was being seduced. The voice seemed to be getting more and more excited. "Come here." Wei Bai heard that the voice seemed to be close to her ear, and that sweet voice came over. It also turned into an evil excitement. "I caught you." Wei Bai slapped it. She, who had a strong consciousness, was as violent as Godzilla here. Although she couldn't see anything, if something strange touched her body, she would beat it violently in the direction of that thing. So Wei, in the middle of the white mist, grabbed something that she didn't know what it was. She beat it with her hands and feet. Caught me? What's so fun about hide and seek? Let's wrestle and box. Pretending to be mysterious. Wasn't it just an egg? She couldn't take care of those perverted strategists, not even an egg. She might as well follow the system home and sell sweet potatoes. The thing in her hand screamed and suddenly disappeared. The white mist dissipated, and Weiwei finally saw clearly that she was standing next to a huge heart. That heart continued to beat. It was extremely strange, and that thing just now had entered this heart. Weiwei was speechless as she looked at his big heart. It was really hard to explain. A timid voice suddenly sounded in his heart. Who are you? Her voice was tender and childlike. Weiwei pondered for a moment, and a mischievous thought rose in her heart. It's your mother. However, when she thought of an egg calling her mother every day, others would think that she was a hen. She shuddered, goosebumps rising all over her body. Forget it, Weiwei said with a calm face and disdain. I'm your master, the one who takes care of you every day. When are you going to wake up? What's the use of keeping you if you only eat and don't work? She had guessed it. The voice in the heart was the consciousness of the egg. The system did not follow her into her consciousness and waited for her outside. She could only make wild guesses based on her rich experience. Wake up, Weiwei nodded. If you don't wake up, I'm going to abandon you and raise other eggs. The egg was a little anxious. You're not going to play with me anymore? Weiwei, you're so weak, what's there to play with? I'm leaving first. After saying that, Weiwei turned around and left without hesitation. The egg immediately said, Don't go, I'm so bored, there's nothing here. Weiwei, what does it have to do with me? The egg was dispirited. I like you, can you stay? As soon as he said that, those root-like things suddenly moved. Chapter 21:21. Weiwei stomped on the ground and kicked away a few tree roots that were trying to wrap around her. She then turned around and smiled coldly at the heart. His delicate and fair face had been expressionless the entire time. At this moment, his smile was like a cold light in a white hell. It was breathtaking. If you like me, then wake up and play with me. Weiwei called out softly, Si Bao. She opened her eyes as soon as she finished. The system whispered in her ear, Don't call him that, it's too unpleasant. Weiwei exhaled slowly. I was almost entangled just now, this egg is a tough one. But her consciousness was only a few years old, it was very childish. With this kind of IQ, it would be easy to coax. Just now, in her consciousness, if she did not run fast enough, she would have been entangled. The system said, Don't take this kind of risk next time, your consciousness is the most important thing to you. Weiwei said, I don't want to take the risk, but you can't expect me to attack an unconscious egg. Just as she finished speaking. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Weiwei. The system said, Damn, why is it so high? Weiwei thought for a while and understood, that egg's IQ is very low, I just coaxed it and it immediately liked me. Just like a child, liking someone would cause the favorability to skyrocket. There were no conflicts of interest, nor were there so many twists and turns. Weiwei suddenly felt that attacking an egg was really good. In the empty land of consciousness, the sound of an intense debate came from the heart. That childish voice shouted, I like her, I want to play with her. Another incomparably languid voice rang out, I like her too, especially when she smiles. I really want to tear her apart. An irritable voice said, I'm hungry, I want to go out too, I want to eat, I want to kill. In the voices of their heated debate, a cold, magnetic and deep male voice sounded. Insufficient nutrition, unable to awaken. As soon as this voice came out, the rest of the voices immediately fell silent. The deep voice said faintly, Continue sleeping. I like her. I want to be with her. His childish voice sounded a little scared. I want to be with her. She was the first to enter this place and the first to not be afraid of it. A creature that smiled at it. The low voice sounded extremely rational. Is it because of the fledgling complex? We all have this kind of dependency complex. She was the first creature we saw and she was indeed our mother. The childish voice said, But she said that she is our master. What is a master? The deep voice sounded again. The God that controls everything. The word God carried a dark and evil aura. The voice that controlled everything was still cold and indifferent as it said to the childish voice, Wake up first, we will continue to sleep. If you suddenly don't like our God, you can kill him. What if she likes it? They didn't understand the answer. He fell into a deep sleep due to lack of nutrition. The unconscious egg in the culture tank suddenly moved. On the monitoring equipment, various data exploded like crazy. A few of the equipment couldn't withstand this sudden surge and actually exploded. The scientists immediately shouted in surprise. Zero's consciousness has been activated. Wei Bai, who had just climbed out of the sleep chamber, looked at the glass culture tank. The egg suddenly made an innocent voice like a child. Master, I'm here to play with you. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Bai in the system, it wasn't strange that the egg could talk. What was strange was that the favorability climbed so quickly. Chapter 21-22. The entire laboratory was overjoyed to announce that Zero had awakened her consciousness. They had succeeded in this miraculous experiment. Team Dr. Zero's follow-up research continued. And the main person in charge of this research was Wei Bai. Wei Bai applied for more life sources from her superiors. The person in charge, AI Me, immediately approved. After all, if Zero's ability was successfully developed, it would be much easier for their base to survive in the apocalypse. Zero's awakened consciousness was only a child of a few years old. But for the leader of the base, this kind of ability user was easy to control. Now, among the ability users, only number 2, number 4, number 5, and number 8 listened to orders. The remaining few, especially number 7, would not listen to anything he said. He was still thinking about Wei Bai's life every day. Wei Bai flipped through the proposal and chatted with Zero. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Zero's voice was soft. I feel that my heart is beating very fast and the blood in my veins is flowing very fast. When you're beside me, my body even feels numb. Wei Bai, ? Then she looked up at the egg. After a moment of silence, she said, You're blushing. Actually, the egg was red. Above the middle of the egg, there were 2 blushes. It was cute and scary. Zero, I'm blushing? What's wrong with me? Wei Bai was expressionless. You're lovesick. You're like this when you see me. It means that you're devout and obedient to me. You like me when you see me. Whatever I say is right. Zero was silent for a while before she realized. So I want to obey you. That's why I'm like this? By abduct idiot, thick-skinned, Vivian nodded calmly. Yes, is it because when I talk to you, you feel numb all over, comfortable everywhere, and warm all over? This is because you worship me very much and want to obey me very much. In this world, Wei Bai also didn't think of the road of love. In front of a few years old egg, no matter how dedicated she was, she couldn't eat it. Moreover, the child's IQ was 0, so he needed an elder. If she could play the role of a good mother, she could also get 100 kinship points. The reason why other planes couldn't use kinship strategies was because they had all grown up. No matter how much he lacked kinship, he wouldn't give full kinship to someone. That was several times more difficult than love. However, Zero was a special target. Wei Bai was very confident. A child's IQ was 0. What she relied on the most at this moment was kinship. The system also said that Zero's current 25 favorability points were similar to the value of kinship. Zero was silent for a moment before asking, What does it feel like to be electrocuted? Is it as comfortable as I am now? Wei Bai pulled some wires outside the culture tank. This is the wire that powers your energy source. There's electricity inside. Just as she finished speaking, the wires suddenly floated up. Zero asked curiously, Is it inside? After saying that, countless wires exploded, and the laboratory fell into darkness. Countless electric arcs were drawn from the wires and entered the egg. The glass culture tank was about to explode. Wei Bai suddenly shouted, Stop, Zero! Zero paused and all the wires fell. The laboratory's backup battery was immediately connected, and countless new wires were pulled in for emergency repair. Within a minute, all the electricity was restored. However, this also caused a lot of losses. For example, the experimental subjects died immediately after the nutrition was delivered. Chapter 21-23. Several scientists cried out in dismay, and some even came to ask Wei Bai for help. Wei had a headache and rubbed her temples, sending away a bunch of people who came to complain. Then she said coldly, Zero, you can't suddenly explode like this in the future. Zero's voice weakened. My body doesn't feel anything even after the electric shock, so what Master said is wrong. Wei calmly duped, because I am a unique existence to you, so other than me, nothing in this world, no one can give you this kind of comfortable feeling. Zero was stunned for a while as if it was thinking about something. But its IQ was too low, so it couldn't understand. It just felt that Wei Bai was right. What she said was right. Zero said sweetly, I want to be more comfortable, Master. Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and said with a bit of affection, How do you want to be comfortable? System. Is this driving? What a shameful line. Zero was a little shy and the blush on its eggshell became more obvious. I want to see you smile at me. Wei Bai was expressionless, she wanted to laugh at the sky. She had never seen a strategy with such a low requirement. In the past the strategy was, you take off XX we'll do XX. Or I'll lock you up and if you dare to escape we'll break your legs. In the end she almost couldn't recognize the symbol XX. The corners of Bai Weiwei's mouth twitched without batting an eyelid. Then she revealed the perfect smile of someone who had roamed the Jianghu for many years. Her lips, which were originally straight and serious, curved up sweetly like cherry branches. Her red lips on her fair face had a soul-stirring beauty. Her cold and indifferent eyes also curved slightly. Her eyes were clear and stars fell into her eyes. Zero suddenly stopped responding, and even the blush on its eggshell disappeared. The whole egg was soaked in the nutrient solution and it was very quiet. Wei Bai naturally put away her charming smile and returned to her usual serious and indifferent self. She glanced at the time and said, "All right, that's all for today. I'll come back tomorrow." Wei Bai picked up some Doomsday Warrior teaching materials and was just about to turn around and leave. Suddenly, a dark and lingering sigh came from behind him. "I do," Wei Bai frowned. Zero's voice? Just as she turned around, she heard the voice screaming in excitement. "I really like it." The constraints of the fledgling plot, as well as the softest feelings, suddenly poured out of the nest at this moment. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 50. Wei Bai. After this scream, a huge wave of energy came from the culture tank. All the instruments let out a sharp warning sound, and all the wires and tubes burst open. Not only did this force break through the protective shield of the laboratory, but the remaining force also spread to the human base not far away. Several men from the mercenary group were seriously injured by this power. The people in the laboratory were the first to bear the brunt. Although they were wearing protective suits, everyone was hit to the ground and vomited blood. The only one who was not affected was Wei Bai. There was not a trace of pressure around her. Only Zero acted like a spoiled child. "Master, smile again, I like it so much." Wei Bai expressed that the increase in favorability made her scared. And this power continued to be released. Then except for her, everyone was finished. Wei Bai immediately stopped it. "Zero, stop. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. / fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here. Teach fast crossing system, Prince Charming, come over here." Chapter 21-24. Zero, I can't stop, I'm so excited, so happy. Wei Bai, you're still a child. A crazy child who is like a nuclear weapon from the apocalypse. Once you get angry you want a bunch of people to die with you. Wei Bai suddenly became gentle. She walked in front of the glass trough and put her hand on the glass. Her saintly smile was reflected in the glass. "Do you like lullabies? Zero, I'll sing for you." The best way to calm it down was to sleep. Zero's excitement continued, but its attention was diverted. Its power also weakened a bit. "Lullaby?" Wei Bai continued, "Good children like it. Listen to my voice and be quiet." Zero quieted down a bit, but its power was still released. Wei Bai suddenly sang in a low voice. This body's voice was very soft and sweet. It was just that the doctor's image was too scary. The original body's appearance was good, and her voice was also good. They were both very sweet girls. So when she became gentle and sang softly, it was like a feather falling, soft and unbelievably beautiful. This was a simple ballad from the apocalypse. The tune was simple and the lyrics were a few lines back and forth. "In the dark silk, I hold you in my arms, we fall into the eternal night." The apocalypse was indeed the apocalypse, even a lullaby was so dark. Zero quieted down and its power slowly disappeared. That egg slowly was pressed against the glass. The huge eggshell was pressed against Wei Bai's palm. It was like she was stroking it. A sweet dream. It whispered, "Master, you are my God." Ding, the male lead's affection is at 70. Wei Bai, there was something wrong with the favorable impression points. It was too fast. There had never been a world that could be this fast. Could it be that she had been wrong in the past? She should have been focusing on kinship instead of love? Or was it that the main system of this world saw that she was working too hard and finally had a conscience and gave her a target for the sweet biscuit? Wei Bai was suspicious. How could the main system be so kind? She sang it over 10 times and finally coaxed the egg to sleep. The laboratory was a complete mess. The medical team quickly entered and carried the scientists out. Wei Wei Bai was not injured at all. She stood indifferently in front of the culture tank with a cold expression. She was actually just chatting with the system. I've only been with this egg for a week. Other than chatting with it and teaching it some doomsday rules, I haven't done anything else. So how did her favorability suddenly soar to 70? The system also flipped through the information, but the information was incomplete. After all, some hidden information would not be released if the side quests were not released. Furthermore, the consciousness of that egg was hidden very deeply. If the system wanted to find out what the egg was thinking, it had to leave Wei Wei Bai. He was doing such a loss-making job, so he couldn't figure out why his favorability increased so quickly. The system tried to find a reason. It can't be the egg's nestling complex, right? Some eggs treat the first person they meet as their mother, so children have a natural affection for their mother. Especially the younger the child, the purer and higher the natural affection for their mother. Bai Weiwei thought about it and agreed with the system's words. But the answer just came out. Then he heard a series of favorability notifications. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 10. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 25. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Wei Bai and the system fell into a deep state of doubt. That is your favorability notification broken? Transmigration system. Male God, come here. Transmigration system. Male God, come here. Transmigration system. Male God, come here. And transmigration system. Male God, come here. Transmigration system. Male God, come here. Chapter 21-25. The system had already taken out a pile of repair tools with a sad face. The indicator has at least 200,000 life points. Please don't break. When I bought it, I bought the best one, and the shelf life was also 10,000 years. In the end, it broke. When Wei Wei Bai heard that it had 200,000 life points, it was possible to buy a new one. She could only let the system repair it. Wei Wei Bai, no wonder I felt that there was something wrong with the favorability indicator. It jumped so high all of a sudden, it should be the indicator that broke. I guess the egg's favorability is only about 20. The indicator was broken, she guessed it herself. Because this was the first time she encountered such a problem. Wei Wei Bai and the system didn't think of anything else at all. They were discussing how to fix the indicator. And in the eggshell. In the land of consciousness, a hysterical voice came from the huge heart. I want to eat her, she is so sweet, so pure, so delicious. A lazy voice, charming and seductive, sounded. I want to hug her, I want to press her against the dark silk, tear her clothes, and let her fall into the eternal night I weave forever. An evil, depraved, and eternal night full of desire. And that childish voice sounded angrily. Don't touch her, she is my master, my God, my everything. No matter how soft a child was, they would protect their own master like their mother. All kinds of voices made a sharp noise again. Finally, that incomparably indifferent voice, with a trace of displeasure, sounded. Do you all like her? This question received unprecedented unanimous agreement. All the voices converged into one sentence. Like, no matter how much or little they liked. They all liked. The leader's voice that controlled everything finally softened a little. If you like, then work hard to wake up. That trace of gentleness suddenly became cold and ruthless. Then go and get her. Wei Wei Bai, who was reporting in a meeting, felt a chill on the back of her neck, as if she was being stared at by something. She was startled, but quickly adjusted her state of mind and continued to report. After the report, the person in charge of the base, Amy, an old man with a head of silver hair, said amiably, Wei Wei, stay behind after the meeting. There was surprisingly little information about the old man. Wei Wei Bai felt that those with very little information were either passers-by or demon kings with good side quests. Wei Wei Bai's face was indifferent as she nodded and said, okay. After the people left, the old man Amy led by Wei Wei out. Wei Wei, Zero's ability is unexpectedly strong. The source of life sent out 3 mercenary groups and we also managed to get some. Wei Wei Bai nodded. I think we should leave the source of life for Zero first. The rest of the espers should focus on training and leveling up. Amy nodded and smiled. I'm not worried about leaving Zero's plan to you. Develop its potential as soon as possible. Wei Wei Bai said, it has great potential. I will do my best. Amy suddenly asked casually, did you see anything in Zero's mind? Wei Wei Bai said, there's nothing but a vast expanse of white. Amy couldn't help but reveal a smug smile. Although I didn't see anything, it still stimulated Zero's mind. You really are my favorite assistant. Wei Wei Bai withdrew the coldness in her eyes and revealed a smile of admiration. It's my honor to work for you, master. Wei Wei Bai took the information and left. Ai Mi's kind smile turned cold as expected. Her eyes were full of complacency and a cold smile. Chapter 21-26. Once Zero's plan succeeded, the world would be under his control. Even Wei Wei Bai didn't know what the blood of the Monster King in Zero's body was, or what the various energy sources were. That was something to create a godlike creature. Once it successfully broke out of its shell, Zero would have no opponents in this world. Everyone would have to crawl in front of it. Moreover, Zero had a genetic modification which was the modification of the Chick complex. It would treat the first person it saw as its parents. It would feel close to that person from the bottom of its heart, and it would have a natural desire to possess and protect that person. The lower its IQ, the more dependent it would be on the first person it met. And Zero's IQ was only a few years old. As long as it had enough nutrition, the first person it saw when the eggshell broke, it would be easy to control everything about it. Ai spent so many years and created such a good assistant like Wei Wei Bai. It was all for the success of this godlike plan. As long as it succeeded, he who controlled Zero would be the true god of this world. He heard that Wei Wei Bai had entered Zero's consciousness and was worried that she would see Zero. So he called Wei Wei Bai over and asked her to make sure that she didn't see anything. Ai heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't let anything enter Zero's consciousness in the future, including Wei Wei Bai. After Wei Wei Bai walked out, she said to the system, "There's something wrong with this old man." That villainous smile on his face. Although Ai had tried his best to pretend to be amiable, but in front of Wei Wei Bai, he was still a little too inexperienced to play with her. That sinister little eyes, that cold smile that twitched from time to time. Also, when he asked her if she had seen anything in the land of consciousness, that made her nervous. Of course, Wei Wei Bai wouldn't tell the truth. So when she said that she didn't see anything, the old man actually relaxed. Strange, she didn't see anything. Why was he so happy? The system flipped through the information. His information is incomplete. It should be related to the subsequent side quests. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Pay more attention to him. I'll go take a look at Zero. Although the favorability indicator was broken. However, Zero's favorability was indeed very easy to increase. After all, she was only a child of a few years. Chat with it and tell it a few jokes. Or singing a song would make it very happy. There was no need to sell their bodies, labor, or acting skills. What a wonderful plane. Wei Wei Bai came to the glass trough in the middle of the hall and said with a smile, "Zero, I brought you snacks." She poured the source of life into the nutrient solution and sent it into the eggshell through the tube. The eggshell glowed faintly. Wei Wei Bai poured the snacks and took off her gloves. She flipped open the book. Today we're going to identify the monsters of the apocalypse. This is the picture book. After that, she placed the album on the glass. This is a man-eating flower beast. It looks very beautiful like a flower, but if people walk in, they will be eaten. She patiently taught it. It was as natural as teaching a child that this was a triangle and this was a circle. Zero didn't say anything. He didn't look as excited as he usually did when he saw her. Was he asleep? Wei Wei Bai smiled and was about to put the album away. Zero suddenly spoke up. "That number 7, what is it?" Wei Wei Bai glanced at it. "It's a prison vine. This vine is one of the most resilient plants in the apocalypse. It's harmless. The only downside is that once you're wrapped around by it, it's very hard to get rid of it. Apart from a certain kind of silver knife that can cut it open, there's no other way. And that kind of knife is very rare. And those who can't escape can only starve to death." Zero. Then what about number 11? Wei Wei Bai, "The Monster King is the leader of all monsters. He's very powerful." Zero. "Is he as powerful as me?" Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but smile gently, her eyes shining brightly. "No, in my eyes, you're the most powerful and the best in the world." For the sake of favorability, casually speaking sweet nothings was as simple as eating and drinking for Wei Wei Bai. Zero was silent for a long time. He didn't scream in excitement, nor did he say anything sweet. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that today's Zero was a bit quiet. Suddenly the favorability prompt sounded. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Wei Wei Bai, 70, 15? The prompt was indeed hopelessly broken. Wei Wei Bai was about to continue teaching when Zero suddenly made an excited sound. "Master, I like you so much." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Wei Wei Bai. Then she knocked on the system. "Hurry up and fix it, I'm confused by these favorability points." The system was knocking on the prompt. Don't worry, I promise to fix it. And inside the eggshell, that incomparably calm voice sounded. She's very good. After that, it went back to sleep. The other two voices started arguing again. Big brother went out, fourth brother also went out, now it's my turn. Scram, it's my turn, I'm starving. And outside the eggshell, Wei Wei Bai was seriously singing a ballad to Zero. From time to time, she would also check when the system fixed the prompt. It was really a peaceful and beautiful plane to conquer. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full text. https://www.sashu.com download the full text. https://www.sashu.com download the full text. https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 21-27. After Wei Wei Bai finished singing the song for the egg, she said to it, I need to go out soon. I'll be gone for about a month. The stimulation of the life source to Zero wasn't big enough. The instrument data even showed that it was malnourished. Wei Wei Bai felt that this thing really didn't know what caused it. Other ability users could already fly with a little bit of life source. But this egg ate so much, yet it was still malnourished? Of course, as a person who wanted to max out the affection points, Wei Wei Bai was very careful about the child psychology of the egg. For example, she must tell it first before going out. She didn't want the egg to think that she didn't want it. Zero said softly, why do you want to leave, Wei Wei Bai? Ever since Wei Wei Bai felt that it was easier to communicate by name, it began to call her by name. Wei Wei Bai's originally serious and cold face softened. Because of you. She had to subdue an egg that was only a few years old. She had to understand the psychology of children. For example, if others were cold, she would smile at it. Only in this way could she satisfy the psychological needs of children. Sometimes, children's possessiveness was stronger than adults. Adults at least knew how to pretend and know how to be hypocritical and modest. And children haven't learned the manners of civilized society. The color of the egg turned red again. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to look worried. Her eyelashes were half closed, and the thick shadow made her eyes look even more sad. Your body has been in a state where it can't mature. Ordinary nutrition has no effect on you. I heard that the blood of the Monster King is the best thing in the world. Others don't dare to attack the Monster King, but for you, I plan to go myself. Actually, it was that old man AI Mi's suggestion. She wasn't going alone, but she was going with 4 ability users. After all, Zero had been unable to mature and hatch. That old man AI Mi was more anxious than her. The old man's information had always been incomplete. In everyone's evaluation, he was a good person, especially kind. But Wei Wei Bai flipped through the information. That old man was simply white and black. Was he really so kind that he would conduct such a tragic human experiment? Would they send so many people to their deaths just for the source of life? And she realized that these tragic things were all her fault. It was the old man who had given the order, so she would be given the biggest share of the credit in the end. The original owner was very grateful to the old man. She had even forgotten about the torture she had experienced when she was experimented on by the old man. However, after analyzing the information, Wei Wei Bai felt that the old man was trying to trick her. Now that she had taken the credit, it would be better for her to carry out these experiments in the future and send people to their deaths. It was all her doing. Wei Wei Bai felt that in this plane, Zero, who had been conquered, was a sweet cookie. The biggest problem should be a great villain like AI Mi. Zero's voice was soft and sobbing. I want to go with you, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai looked at the eggshell affectionately. It's very dangerous there. I'll go by myself. I'll be back soon. Zero, can you not go? I'll continue to sleep and not wake up. That way I can save on nutrition. Its awakening consumed a lot of nutrients. As a result, the other 3 brothers were forced to sleep. Wei Wei Bai's smile became even gentler. She slowly shook her head, her eyes gentle and beautiful. But I want you to stay awake. That way I can talk to you and sing for you. You are the only beautiful existence in this broken world. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her hands and slowly hugged the glass trough, as if she was hugging it. For you I'll do anything. So you have to take good care of yourself. I'll be back as soon as possible. Chapter 21-28. The lines on Zero's body, the nutrient tube. Everything started to shake. Wei Wei Bai comforted it in a low voice. I'll be back after you sleep. She was afraid that it would cause the experimental base to lose power again. Zero, I can absorb the nutrients myself, I don't need you. Its voice calmed down, and the sweetness just now seemed to have disappeared. Wei Wei Bai's eyes moved slightly, and a trace of something was wrong flashed in her heart. But she couldn't figure out where this trace of something was wrong came from. Wei Wei Bai's eyes stared straight at Zero through the clear nutrient solution. I'm your creator, of course I'm responsible for everything about you. You're still young, the most important thing to do is to learn, sleep and grow. She treated it as a child. A child that had to be protected. This strong sense of protection made Zero silent. Wei Wei Bai was just about to wave goodbye and get rid of the trouble of raising a child. Zero's voice was low and peaceful. I want to sleep, sing me a song. Wei Wei Bai smiled, crossed her arms and nodded. Only you can ask me so casually, I'm willing. Then she sang a lullaby in a low voice. A familiar, sweet and gentle voice. It slowly flowed through the entire laboratory. Some assistants and scientists couldn't help but listen. Their incomparably cold doctor would only be so gentle to Zero. Zero slowly fell into a deep sleep. All the data became incomparably peaceful. Suddenly Zero's voice was very soft. You're very good. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Wei Wei Bai was very calm about this kind of spastic favorability prompt. The system was still working hard to repair the prompt. The Monster King seemed to have reached the time to reproduce and die, so AI Me asked her to lead a team to kill the Monster King. Everyone knew that the Monster King would give birth to a new Monster King at this time. Then it would complete the mission and die, which was also the Monster King's most vulnerable time. Wei Wei Bai wore a thick combat suit, long-sleeved pants and protective goggles. Then she carried a special laser gun and followed the team on the road. The ability users this time were 2, 3, 4, 5. Their names were easy to remember but their abilities were varied. She was the boss so she didn't say anything along the way. The system monitored AI Me and Egg's situation. The abnormal favorability and AI Me's villainous setting. This made Wei Wei Bai very vigilant. The system said, the egg fell into a deep slumber, but I didn't invade its consciousness. I wonder what it's doing in the egg? Wei Wei Bai, can you see whether it's a person or a chicken in the egg? The system said, it looks like a human but because it's soaked in an unknown liquid, it's hard to be sure. Maybe it's a seal or a dolphin. When dolphins and seals were in the water they did look very much like humans. Wei Wei Bai felt that since the egg was asleep, there should be nothing to monitor. He turned his attention to the villain. What's that old man doing? The system said, he's been looking at the egg every day, and he's even imitating you to sing for the egg. It seems like he wants the egg to call him daddy. Wei Wei Bai. Luckily I didn't let the egg call me mom. For someone like her who was obsessed with looks, she would rather die than be paired with that old man. The system said, the old man even gives your egg some life force and a few types of ability liquids. Wei Wei Bai, is he trying to cultivate monsters? How many types of ability liquids can he give? The superpower fluid was extracted from the bodies of various monsters. The download the at https://m. Sashu. com// to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click save below to record this chapter. Chapter 21-29. 1 could make a human die in a very artistic way. 2 could make even a superpowered person die. The system said, the egg has no sequelae, it even absorbed it. Wei Wei Bai's attention was attracted by the villain. What else did he do? The system said, I think he's going to become the god of doomsday and something about a nestling complex. Wei Wei Bai collected the information and closed her eyes to think. It took a lot of effort to sort it out before he said to the system, Zero is a very powerful superpower user. If it hatches successfully, it can control the entire world. Moreover, Zero's genes should be implanted with a strong nestling plot. It will have a natural affinity with whoever sees it first. She did nothing but smile and sing a song to Zero. She did not do anything. But the affinity still increased. This was the effect of the nestling complex. Although the indicator was broken, it did not stop her from guessing whether Zero had an affinity with her. Wei Wei Bai basically guessed, that's why the old man asked me if I saw it. If I really did see it, I'd probably be dead now. That old man wanted to be Zero's father. After chatting with the system about the villain's plan, she heard, we've arrived, prepare to jump. Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes, they were cold and clear. She got up and opened the door of the plane, the strong wind blew like knives. Wei Wei Bai put on her goggles and said to the superpowered people behind her, if anyone can't handle it, shout for me. With that, she jumped down without a parachute. The power of space could teleport her anywhere. She aimed at the Monster King's head and jumped on it. Then she reached behind her and pulled out a long silver sword, the world's toughest and sharpest weapon, and stabbed it into the monster's head. Blood spurted out. With so much blood it was probably enough to hatch Zero. The Monster King roared and all the monsters rushed over. All kinds of strange attacks were randomly directed at Wei Bai. Wei Bai smiled. Bright blood dripped from her hair. Her eyes were dyed with blood, like the setting sun with wanton arrogance. However, she suddenly felt numb at the back of her neck as if someone was staring at her. Wei Bai suddenly turned around and disappeared into the air with her sword in hand. That peeping line of sight was immediately cut off. The lazy and seductive voice came from the egg. Aya, we've been discovered. She's really pretty. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 25. That calm and magnetic male voice said with a hint of danger, don't peek. The other two voices also sounded. In a childish and sweet voice she said, the one outside is singing so badly. I don't want to listen. I want Wei. I'm hungry, I want to go out, I want to go out. Outside the egg Amy was laughing crazily. Soon, all that's left is the Monster King's blood. Just a little more and you'll be out. Then he would be its father. He would be its only master. He brought back a large amount of blood and brought back 3 superpowered people. Number 3, who had the fire superpower, died. He wanted to take the treasure in the monster's nest, but he was surrounded and killed by the monsters. Just as the fighter jet was about to land in the base, the system's uneasy voice sounded in her ear, it's been blocked. Wei Bai asked, what's been blocked? The system said, I can't see anything in the base including that old man. Download the https://m. Sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Next time you open the bookshelf you'll see it. If you like. Chapter 2130. Wei Bai frowned. The system analyzed, although the side quest hasn't come out yet, it might have something to do with that old man. Wei Bai didn't show any expression on her face. Instead, she calmly carried the blood and walked in with a few psychics. Aimi stood in the hall and was very happy when he saw her. He was so happy that it was a little strange. Wei Bai still looked serious and handed the blood to Aimi. Mission accomplished. Aimi's fingers were even trembling. He immediately rushed to the glass tank and poured all the blood into the nutrient delivery tube. Soon, a red color appeared in the glass tank. It was murky and evil. It was unsettling. Zero's data also began to rise. Aimi was so excited that he kept shaking. Soon it will be out. After that, he turned around and said, everyone gather. The psychics gathered, including number 7 who had always wanted her life. He was tied up because he was the most disobedient. The old man Aimi opened his hand and said to everyone, soon, you will witness a beautiful miracle. This world has been rotting for too long and urgently needs a god to descend. That is Zero. It will be the most powerful weapon in this world. Monsters, humans, nothing can compare to it. Wei Bai looked at the cult-like old man and silently took a few steps back. Zero didn't make a sound as if it was really asleep. Maybe it was because there was too much monster blood. So it ate too much and digested it. Aimi's smile suddenly disappeared slowly and became ferocious and terrifying. But the nutrients it needs are far from enough. It needs more and it needs your lives. After that, Wei Bai's mind went blank. Suddenly she crawled to the ground. She struggled to look up and saw all the psychics lying on the ground moaning in pain. The system said, your brain just suffered a strong impact, I gave you a life guarantee. No wonder she didn't feel pain, but her body was rapidly weakening. The system said, you have a fatal controller hidden in your brain. Wei Bai said, is there no information? The system replied, no, this plane is missing a lot of information. Ever since Wei Bai obtained the power of space that he couldn't afford, the degree of fragmentary information was frighteningly high. Aimi walked towards number 2. You're a wind elementalist, aren't you? Number 2 was at a loss. Aimi had already raised the gun, pointed it at his head and fired. Then the scientists acted as if they didn't see anything. They dragged the corpses to the nutrition tubes and dug out the ability crystals from the heads of the ability users. That scene was completely pixelated. Next, the espers were dealt with one by one. Number 7 seemed to want to manipulate the air, but his brain had been severely injured. Aimi pointed the gun at his head and said, goodbye, my disobedient child. In the end, only Wei Bai was left. Wei Bai lay on the ground quietly. She did not look like she was in pain. Her face was pale and fragile, and there was even a hint of loneliness and sadness in her eyes. Like a flower falling into the rain. Even Aimi, who had a heart of stone, softened for a moment. Wei Wei Bai, the child who worships me the most, and also my first successful test subject. You are my pride. Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly as if she did not understand why he was treating her like this. But there was no hatred in her eyes. AI Mi's smile could not help but become amiable. It's okay, I'll give you an injection so it won't hurt. You will understand me. This world needs God to save us. Your sacrifice is worth it. Button. Chapter 2131. Wei Wei Bai's expression was puzzled, confused, and sad. Her voice was so weak that it was almost inaudible. Can I hug Zero before I die? AI Mi smiled understandingly. I know. I hugged you the day you were successfully born. Wei Wei Bai, hearing this is as scary as a caterpillar crawling over my body. AI Mi got up with a disgusting look of pity. As long as you can crawl over by yourself. Wei Wei Bai was just stalling for time. Her body was so weak that she had no strength, but the life support guaranteed that she would not feel pain. She was almost able to use her ability as long as she was given more time. So she pretended to be weak, slowly crawled to the glass tank and reached out to touch the glass. There was a murky liquid inside and she could barely see the eggshell. The crystals of the superpowered were all thrown in. Wei Wei Bai's pale face was reflected in the glass. She was calculating the time it would take for her body to recover. She said hypocritically, Zero, I'm back to see you. Zero suddenly trembled and a calm voice came from the eggshell. Are you hurt? Wei Wei Bai, this voice, why is it so cold? Shouldn't Zero be sweet? Zero's calm voice sounded, do you need my help? This egg seems to have grown up and it's quite polite. Wei Wei Bai's fingers were secretly gathering power, but she did not refute Zero's words. Child, give more encouragement and your favorability will definitely increase. So Wei Wei Bai smiled like a saint, I'm fine as long as I can see you. As soon as she finished speaking, the old man AI Mi came over with the medicine. He grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm, good child, we will remember your sacrifice. You superpowered crystals are the real source of Zero's power. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched, it was impossible to reason with a lunatic. She narrowed her eyes dangerously and secretly cut open the space behind her. She was so close to grabbing the old man and entering the space together. Then it would be strange if she did not kill him. The needle was just about to touch her skin. Suddenly, a strange cracking sound came from behind him. AI Mi and Wei Wei Bai were slightly stunned. The cracking sounds grew louder and louder like the sound of eggshells cracking. No, even the glass trough was breaking. The turbid nutrient liquid was disappearing rapidly. They all surged into the cracks in the broken eggshell. AI Mi's eyes were fanatical, and he was about to stab the needle down. Bai Wei Wei had long been on guard. Her entire body was about to retreat, and when she was about to remove the needle, suddenly the needle dropped. The old villain who was grabbing her arms stared at her with bloodshot eyes. Wei Wei Bai, a wire passed through the old man's forehead from the back of his head. It was exceptionally frightening. Wei Wei Bai immediately shook off the old man. When she turned around, she found that the glass trough was broken into pieces. The eggshell fell to the bottom of the glass trough. A lot of the eggshell had fallen off. She saw a hand gently peel off the outer layer of the eggshell. This was an exceptionally strange scene. The voltage in the laboratory became unstable and all kinds of wires burst. All kinds of instruments also made sharp sounds. Wei Wei Bai's body was still weak. She sat on the ground and watched the eggshell fade away bit by bit. It was like a hand, then a foot that was stretched out and finally his face. This was a body that was close to that of a teenager, but more mature than a teenager. Long hair that was as thick as dark silk fell down from the young man's flawless white body. Crystal clear water droplets fell from his hair into his skin. His eyelashes were as thick as black wings, and a holy halo appeared behind him. Everyone stared at him blankly. He slowly walked out of the broken glass. The glass shattered into powder under his fragile feet. Wei Wei Bai sat on the ground with a weak and pale face and looked up at him. He came in front of her, slowly bent down and reached out his cold hands to hold her face. As if he was sighing, his half-closed eyes slowly opened. A cold golden light flowed in the depths of his eyes, like a light hell. You want to see me? As you wish. He whispered, calm and soul-stirring. Wei Wei Bai was stunned and then said softly, Zero? Fuck, how old was her soft and cute heart? Why did it feel like she had hatched a great demon king? Chapter 2132. Ling lowered her eyes to look at her. There was a sense of restrained coldness in her clear eyes. His fingers gently slid across her cheeks as if he was testing something. Finally, His fingertips came to the corner of her eyes and looked into the depths of her beautiful eyes. "What do you want me to do?" His voice was low, cold, and unwavering. Even his expression was as holy and calm as an angel. It was as if Wei Wei Bai was saying something, as if she was making a wish to him. And the wish would definitely come true. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched, and there was a trace of fluctuation in her eyes. It seemed like doubt, but more than that, it was curiosity. "Have you grown up?" she asked in a low voice. The little cookie suddenly turned into a big ice cube. She couldn't think straight for a moment. She was about to get into a car accident. Zero looked at her indifferently. There was a kind of frozen coldness in his emotionless face. "No, I've always been here." After saying that, he suddenly closed his eyes slowly. His whole body fell into Wei Wei Bai's arms. Wei Wei Bai reached out and caught him. She almost couldn't catch the smooth touch. Wei Wei Bai held the giant baby that had just been born and looked at the mess around her. The scientists and a bunch of assistants hid in the side trembling. They were all accomplices of the villain AI Me. As an ability user, Bai Weiwei's strength was still very great. She pulled her coat and wrapped it around Zero. After carrying him up, she said, "Clean up everything." The person in charge of the base was dead, so she was the boss. This was the rule of the Doomsday where the strong preyed on the weak. The scientists and assistants immediately ran over to clean up everything in fear. Wei Wei Bai brought Zero back to the room and put him on the bed. She also covered him with a blanket to cover his healthy white body. Wei Wei Bai sat by the bed, speechless. "I keep feeling that something is wrong. Let me figure it out." In just a month, Zero had not only hatched, but his brain had also turned from a baby to a normal person's IQ. This increase in IQ was simply shocking. However, the system saw that the gray area of the data was beginning to unlock. He said, "The data is starting to be unlocked. Wait for me for a while, there might be new data coming out later." Wei Wei Bai nodded, only to find that Ling suddenly opened her eyes. His long black hair was suddenly dyed by the cold blue haze. His cold hair color was like the ocean under the fog, giving off a deep and strange sense of beauty. Zero slowly stood up. Wei Wei Bai's eyebrows twitched. This guy, as expected, his half-closed eyes slowly opened. However, the color of his eyes changed from gold to brown. The dark red color carried a kind of demonic and rich beauty. He suddenly revealed a beautiful smile and casually reached out to push his long hair back. He reached out and grabbed Wei Wei Bai's clothes. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed and she was about to resist. He looked at her with a picky yet enchanting gaze. "Not bad. If you were too ugly, I might have killed you." His voice was low and hoarse. Every word he said made people's ears go numb. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed from puzzlement to vigilance. Her fingers clenched the blanket, ready to disappear at any time. However, Zero whispered, "Can I call you Wei Wei? Seeing you smile so happily at that little fool, I'm really jealous." Chapter 2133. Their natural good feelings came from the first time they met her. This was the effect of the nestling complex. But this effect couldn't really influence their thoughts. Only the person who made them fall in love at first sight. They felt like they liked her very much, so they had a desire to monopolize and protect her. Even the coldest and calmest boss couldn't stop the influence of the nestling complex. Wei Wei Bai blinked as if she was confused by the scene in front of her. And her fingers, holding a small knife, were already on Zero's neck. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, "Who are you?" She wasn't affected by the other party's seductive charm at all. However, Zero reached out and grabbed her knife. With a crack, the knife shattered into pieces. He narrowed his eyes and smiled, "You're so naughty. Just smile at me and sing to me. This is the only kindness I can show to my creator." After saying that, Zero lazily got up and stretched. He murmured in a low voice, "I'm hungry," then he left the bed naked and walked out step by step. This figure, this walking posture. It was unbelievably perfect. Wei Wei Bai immediately jumped up from the bed and followed. As soon as she went out, she saw an inhumane scene. The scientists and assistants were all entangled by wires. Zero stood in the middle of the hall with a lazy and seductive face. All the glass troughs began to break. He stepped on the glass barefoot and picked the innards of a monster. He inserted his fingers into the innards and the innards withered. A trace of satisfaction appeared on Zero's face. Not enough for us to wake up. Wei Wei Bai wanted to light a cigarette at this moment and greet the main system's unspeakable lower body. Tongzi, how many consciousnesses does the monster below have? In fact, she felt that something was wrong from the beginning, but Zero had always been soft. She was also happy to be lazy, and her attention was dragged down by that old man Aimi. As a result, she didn't notice in time that there was something wrong with the target. The system looked at the unlocked information and also wanted to light a cigarette to greet the main system. For Wei Bai was silent. 2 people with schizophrenia were more than enough. What did it mean to have 4 of them? They could play a round of mahjong. The system replied, due to the fact that there were too many superpower elixirs, it led to schizophrenia. The primary personality represents rationality and wisdom, and the secondary personality is the naked pervert who is eating. It represents temptation and desire, and it has a powerful hypnotizing ability. The third one is violent and hungry and likes to kill. The last one is your sweet biscuit who cries when it's useless. Wei Bai was speechless. The system added, all 4 of them need to reach 100 favorable impression points before it's considered a success. In other planes, a single target was enough to torment them. There were 4 in this plane. As expected, every time her favorability rose too quickly, it wasn't a good sign. Wei Bai stared at the second personality. It had grayish-blue hair and reddish-brown eyes. It was clearly the same face. But when the main personality appeared, it was the ascetic type. And this, just by standing there lazily, she had a seductive posture. Bai Weiwei looked at him and felt that something was wrong. Her body actually surged with a strange heat. She whispered, Tongzi? The system immediately took out the mineral water for the system and poured it on Weiwei Bai. Weiwei Bai was indeed much cooler. But in the laboratory, everyone who was awake was slowly crawling towards zero in a deranged manner. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 2134. After Zero absorbed all the nutrients in the nutrient tank, he turned around. His long hair fell behind him, making him look like a mermaid that had just emerged from the bottom of the sea. Every step he took was able to lure out the demons in people's hearts. Those people's eyes turned red and their bodies started to twitch. Then they started hugging each other. Zero slowly revealed a cruel smile. He was like a monster that toyed with people's hearts, looking down at the ants beneath his feet. Then he seemed to have noticed something. He raised his head and looked at Weiwei Bai, who was standing on the iron ladder. Her eyes were clear and she was not affected by him. However, she seemed to be frightened as she stood on the top and looked at him blankly. Zero tilted his head strangely and put his fingertips into his thin lips. The seductive smile on his face became even more demonic. The system silently poured Bai Weiwei another bucket of the system's pure water. The excitement that had just erupted from Bai Weiwei's body was gone. Therefore, she remained calm and looked at the man who looked like a monster below. The smile in Zero's eyes finally turned into a strange doubt. It was as if he felt that no one could resist his temptation. He kicked away those people who were rolling on the ground and walked up the stairs step by step. Weiwei Bai tried to look at his neck calmly. She was really calm and was not affected by him at all. The reddish-brown color in Zero's eyes was like blood. It was more like a red rose that emitted an evil fragrance. He squinted his eyes dangerously. Don't you like me? On the side that represented desire, there was a strong sense of vanity that wanted everyone to look at him. He wanted everyone in this world to kneel down and look at him. To be trampled by him. Weiwei Bai could not even pull out a smile for him. I don't like you. The one I like is still the child who calls me master sweetly. After saying that, Weiwei Bai looked at the chaotic scene below calmly and complained, next time remember to tell me when you are in heat. I will find a few professional attendants for you. Otherwise it will be very dirty. The seductive smile on Zero's face disappeared. She looked at him calmly as if she was looking at an object. There was no trace of gentleness. He was not moved in the slightest. Weiwei Bai glanced at the time. As a successful experiment subject, it's time for you to rest. Which scene do you like to sleep in? Do you need me to make an eggshell for you? The colder she was. The color in Zero's eyes deepened. Or even violent. He suddenly reached out to grab her, wanting to destroy the calmness in her eyes. But in the next second she suddenly disappeared. She reappeared with a gun in her hand and shot him in the waist without hesitation. It was the heaviest anesthetic. However, it seemed to have no effect on Zero at all. Instead, his hand grabbed her. Weiwei Bai instantly disappeared again. What an annoying ability. Ling looked up coldly. Her coquettish eyes were no longer as natural as before. Instead, they were filled with irritation. In the next second, he seemed to see something. He grabbed at the air with his long fingers, and a malicious smile appeared on his face. Caught you. He pulled down fiercely but pulled down a piece of clothing. Zero was stunned for a moment before his eyes suddenly lit up with fervor. He looked around for her figure. His tired and lazy heart was completely activated by a fanaticism. Suddenly he reached out and grabbed at the air. Zero smiled and his voice became sweet. Where are you, Weiwei? Come out and play with me. Chapter 2135. The world after the apocalypse was a mess. The base had lost its leader, the mercenaries, the scientists, and a bunch of assistants. Apart from the initial period of trembling with fear. After realizing that everything was working normally, they returned to their numb and indifferent attitude. After all, in this world it was not unusual for a bunch of people to die every day. It would be abnormal if no one died. To the people in the base it was just a change of leader. As long as the operation was not messed up and they could still survive, it did not matter. Weiwei Bai was also expressionless as she walked around with a burden. Zero reached out and pinched the corner of her long white coat with his white fingers. He was already wearing clothes. It was the suspenders that she chose for him and a white mango t-shirt. He was also wearing cartoon sneakers. The young man, who was wearing an older child's outfit, pursed his thin lips, his beautiful eyebrows slightly furrowed. His voice was full of dependence. Weiwei, are you busy? Weiwei Bai lowered her head and was recording some data. In front of her was a large monster corpse. A bunch of people surrounded it to study. This year's monster wave was coming. The energy of the protective shield might not be able to withstand this year's monster wave. Because of the birth of a new king, a large number of humans were needed to support the new king of monsters. So this year there would be many monsters and they would be very strong. If the base could not withstand this wave of monster attack, everyone would die together. It was normal for the people in the base to be so excited about Zero's birth. This meant that the survival rate of the base would be higher. The premise was that this guy could be controlled? She thought of Zero's second personality, that seductive bastard who bewitched everyone. Weiwei Bai's hand that was holding the pen was shaking. It was not certain who that guy would help when he appeared. What if he thought it was fun and let the monsters have sex with the humans? The scene would definitely be blocked. Weiwei Bai narrowed her eyes and said to the system, "Are there any signs of the appearance of these personalities?" The system said, "Nutrition, third baby's murderous personality needs the most nutrition, fourth baby needs the least." Weiwei Bai calculated, the main character, eldest baby, probably did not need much nutrition, just a little more than fourth baby. That second baby needed the second most nutrition. Because there were too many personalities, she decided to give them a serial number. In any case, Zero had eaten all the superpowered people in the base. Now, this title shall be given to Zero's personality. If he had a few more personalities one day, he would be able to gather a bunch of Calabash brothers. Weiwei Bai, fortunately I have a baby bird complex. Otherwise, I would have died as soon as I appeared. The fledgling complex should also depend on one's IQ. The lower the IQ, the higher the initial favorability of the fledgling complex. Just like the main personality, his IQ would definitely be high. The initial level of favorability was extremely low. Just 110. Weiwei Bai sorted out some of the relationships between the personalities and was about to continue filling in the monster data. She felt a steady tug at the corner of her clothes behind her. Weiwei Bai couldn't help but turn around, only to see that the youth behind her was more than a head taller than her. He was staring at her blankly. There was a soft sense of grievance on his angelic face. Weiwei is ignoring me. Last night, she sang to fourth baby and coaxed him to sleep until dawn. Weiwei Bai also had to prevent the other personalities from suddenly flipping out. She was also tired. She hadn't become a mother yet, but she already experienced the miserable experience of raising a giant baby. It was better to give birth to a pillow than a baby. At least the pillow could be used to cushion her head and coax her to sleep. In the end, fourth baby woke up less than half an hour after she slept. Chapter 2136. Zero's sleep time was surprisingly short. Weiwei Bai, with two dark circles under her eyes, looked at the motherless giant baby in front of her with a loving smile. "Mom? No, I need to work too. If I don't work, I won't get any points. How can I raise you without points? You are the most important person to me." Anyway, this giant baby's IQ was not high. Regardless of whether the words were fake or not, she had to coax it first. Sure enough, fourth baby's confused and wronged face revealed a happy smile. His thick eyelashes trembled, and his eyes were as soft as water. His beautiful sky-blue eyes were clearer than the purest gemstones in this world. His golden hair was more dazzling than the sun. Golden hair and blue eyes, he looked like an angel in the legends. Wei Wei Bai silently covered her chest. It was so cute. Zero opened her beautiful blue eyes and asked softly, Wei Wei, you need to work. What is the work? I can help you work. Wei Wei Bai said perfunctorily, I just need to collect some data. That monster is the target of our research. I need to know how thick its skin is, what kind of attacks it can withstand, the structure of its internal organs, and the composition of its blood. Monsters in this world. There were all kinds of weirdos. Not to mention a bunch of aliens, octopus-like creatures, poisonous spiders, and plant monsters. These monsters had a common resonator. And a common nest. It was the Monster King. Every generation of Monster Kings had different abilities, but they all had one thing in common. They could control all monsters. This world is really dangerous, Wei Wei Bai thought calmly. Anyway, she had the power of space and could run anywhere, so she was not afraid of monsters. It was just that Zero's ability had not been fully developed due to lack of nutrition. She did not know if she could run away when the monster tide came. Her ability was not enough to drag another person into the space to hide. The space was full of dangerous space-time power. If she dragged someone in, that person would die. Wei Wei Bai thought as she casually filled in some data. Suddenly, she heard a cry of surprise. She immediately looked up and found that Zero had walked to the large experiment table where the monster's body was placed. Although Zero was the standard height of a man, his body was a little slender, perhaps due to malnutrition. She looked exceptionally slender and beautiful. He stood beside the corpse of a monster the size of a small mountain, just like a real child. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Could it be that he was hungry and wanted to eat something? Don't absorb the monster you've spent so much effort to catch until there's only a layer of skin left. That would be difficult to explain. Bai Wei Wei immediately lifted her foot and walked over. However, she found fourth baby, who had a childish expression on his face, slowly counting something with his fingers. He lowered his black feather-like eyelashes, and his blue eyes were a little gray. He seriously bent his white fingers, and then used the index finger of one hand to count one by one with great effort. 21,102. Bai Wei Wei walked up to him and raised her hand to touch his head. His golden hair was tied up by her hair band, and it fell quietly behind him. Zero's eyelashes fluttered, and a comfortable expression appeared on his face. He narrowed his eyes like a cat. Wei Wei Bai comforted him softly. What's wrong? Are you hungry? I'll take you to eat when I'm done with work. Zero immediately shook his head, shaking it too quickly. She didn't take her hand away but instead rubbed the hair on the top of his head. His golden hair was a little messy on the top of his head. Chapter 2137. It made him look even cuter. No, I'm helping Wei Wei with her work. Zero smiled proudly, then suddenly grabbed Wei Wei Bai's fingers. His fingers were clasped tightly and he used a little too much strength. Wei Wei Bai frowned and Zero immediately relaxed. He said worriedly, Wei Wei, does it hurt? Wei Wei Bai loosened her brows and shook her head. She felt that she could not work anymore. She should just coax the child. She was about to say that she would take him out to play when she suddenly froze. Rows of data appeared in her mind. This was, Wei Wei Bai said cautiously, Tongzi. The system said, it's okay. It's just a data transfer, it won't invade your consciousness. It was guarding her consciousness. Wei Wei Bai finally relaxed, but found that the data in front was almost exactly the same as the data she filled in on the paper. The latter part was the most important data of this monster. It was also the most difficult to study. However, it might not be correct because the lab had not studied it yet. Wei Wei Bai looked at him in shock. Zero looked at her innocently. His blue eyes were pure and soft, and his expression was very pure and innocent. A faint white light appeared on his fingertips, and this white light wrapped around her fingers. After the data transfer, Zero immediately let go of her hand. He did not think that it was difficult and his expression was very calm. Is this the data that Wei Wei wants? I can help Wei Wei with her work. At the end of his sentence, the corner of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a silly and cute smile. Wei Wei Bai looked at him silently. Zero suddenly felt a little scared. He pursed his lips as if he did not know if he did something wrong. Did I mess up the work? He asked softly like a child. Wei Wei Bai shook her head. Suddenly, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Then, she looked up and kissed him gently on his forehead. You did well. You're my pride. This is your reward. Zero liked this feeling very much. Ding, fourth baby's favorability is at 80. He repressed his infantile hysteria, knowing that she did not like his wild mode of expression. After breaking out of the shell, his IQ also began to increase. Slowly he understood a lot. She was no longer just capricious. His feelings for her were also slowly changing. It was as if he was no longer just relying on her. Instead, it was more of a desire to protect. Seeing that she was happily recording the data, Zero couldn't help but narrow his eyes and reveal a satisfied smile. She was very happy. He was also very happy. The work of the monster was done. Weiwei took out some life force and poured it into a cup for Zero to drink. There was not much life source left. He had to be thrifty. Zero hugged the huge cup and gulped down the contents like a child. Weiwei lowered her head and sorted out some teaching materials. She hoped that she could teach this fourth baby to be upright, kind, and beautiful. The remaining 3 personalities weren't anything good, so it was better to keep the best personality. Then, after reaching 100 points, he would let the kind and beautiful fourth baby angel influence the rest of the babies. She thought of Air was transvestite look. Weiwei trembled. Fourth baby was still the best. Weiwei suddenly saw fourth baby looking at the cup expressionlessly. Chapter 2138. This expression made her eyebrows jump again. Was he going to change his personality again? Such an indifferent expression, was it Dewa? Sure enough, the young man in front of her had golden hair dyed with a rich black. His beautiful and pure blue eyes were occupied by an incomparably cold golden color. It was just a matter of a moment. The young man in front of her put down the cup and unhurriedly reached out to take out a handkerchief from the air. This handkerchief was brand new. At first glance, it was taken from the room where they put their daily necessities. This was the upgraded space power. Breaking through space to take something elsewhere, people didn't even need to move. It was much more advanced than her power. Dewa no Zero used the handkerchief to elegantly wipe the corners of his mouth. His eyes were deep with a trace of laziness that just woke up, and the cold golden color circulated in the depths of his eyes. His posture was innately orderly, elegant, and noble. He glanced at Weiwei indifferently, his expression cold and restrained. Besides the data of the Yala beast just now, do you need any other data? The loving smile on by Weiwei's face also disappeared. She rubbed the bridge of her nose with some distress, as if she was surprised by his appearance. Then Weiwei adjusted her state, changing herself from a kind guardian to a calm person in charge of the base. How many consciousnesses do you have? Zero glanced at her indifferently. You don't need to know this. I will restrain them from attacking you. As long as you don't court death, I will give you a benevolent life. His words were arrogant and indifferent. Like a god high above, with a trace of calm softness, he looked at the ants under his feet. Even if she was an ant favored, to him she was just an ant. Weiwei seemed to be more irritated. She took out a box of cigarettes from the drawer and a matchbox. The matchbox was the kind that cost 20 cents before the end of the world. The red wick slid across the cover of the box on her white fingertips, and a cluster of red fireworks suddenly rose. Weiwei put the cigarette between her bright red lips with a hint of laziness. She had always been calm and serious, but at this moment, because of her impatient sarcasm, there was a hint of sharpness in her eyes. Weiwei carelessly exhaled a mouthful of smoke and said sarcastically, "A benevolent life? Do you think that you deserve to mention the word benevolence in this world? To be honest, I'm only interested in your ability. If you want to be a god, then get out of here." "You're not a god. You're a god." She did not care about how capable he was at all. In fact, his attitude was even more arrogant and cold than his. Zero's face was covered in smoke. In the haze, his indifferent eyes appeared even more profound and beautiful. Weiwei flicked the ash off her cigarette elegantly. "I'm not like that old lunatic AI me. I'm not interested in you. To me, if a test subject doesn't listen, then it's trash." Zero seemed to be a little surprised by her attitude. Her indifferent face was reflected in the depths of his cold and deep golden eyes. His slender white fingers tapped on the table unhurriedly. "You seem to be thinking about something." Weiwei calmly said, "This world is full of lunatics, we don't need you. But don't be crazy, I don't buy it." Chapter 2139. Zero's calm eyes finally showed a ripple. It seemed to be true, there was no desire in her eyes. There was no fear of death, surprisingly calm. But why was she so kind and gentle towards his childish personality? Zero suddenly reached out, slowly but irresistibly clasped her chin, forcing her to look at him. His expression was still indifferent, and there was a trace of cold scrutiny in his eyes. I'm stronger than you, number one. Number one, what a cold name. This main personality was ascetic, rational, and a hard bone to chew. Wei Wei Bai's eyes became sharp, and the ruthlessness cultivated by the end of the world surged up. She slowly and fiercely crushed the cigarette butt on the back of his hand. Zero seemed a little surprised, but he didn't avoid it, because it didn't hurt him at all. But in the next second, Wei Wei Bai suddenly clasped his shoulder and threw him on the table. The glass shattered all over the floor. She straddled his waist, sat down hard, and strangled his neck with one hand. Zero didn't seem to be on guard against her impulse. His black hair scattered and fell under the table, calmly and rationally looking at the irritable Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head, her fragrant lips almost touching his. You should be the main personality, but you're really an annoying personality. Just obediently continue to sleep. I only need your childish personality. Her eyes had the murderous determination of a doomsday soldier, and also a careless disregard for death. The only thing that made me happy about your birth was that child. It's better to erase the remaining personality. All her gentleness. It was only the childish personality that she had for him. She didn't care about the rest of the personalities. Zero's indifferent expression didn't change at all. He had been observing her, as if he felt that there was something hidden behind her cold and irritable mask. But he couldn't see it clearly. Wei Wei Bai patted his face like a hooligan. Give me a benevolent life. What a joke. This old lady is in charge of her own life. Who do you think you are? Why should I let you control my life? You're just a cub born a few days old. You really know how to talk big. In the apocalypse, those who had just been born, or those who had just been born with superpowers, they were all called cubs. Cub is a derogatory term. It represented an inexperienced little idiot who overestimated himself. Zero looked at her strangely, as if he was looking at a toy that had suddenly mutated. Her gentleness towards him had disappeared because of his change of personality. Zero's eyelashes drooped slightly, half closing her cold golden eyes. Her black eyelashes were like a net, covering the emotions in the depths of her eyes. He didn't seem to get angry. However, he was a little curious. Like an old wise man, he looked deeply at the furious Wei Wei Bai, as if he was looking at an immature child. Zero stared at her calmly and deeply, without any desire or emotion. He suddenly said indifferently, I'm very disappointed. It seems that you still know nothing about power. After saying that, the space suddenly began to distort. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed, and her eyes instantly became incomparably sharp. Her fingers actually couldn't choke his neck. The cutting power of the space had already arrived behind her, and that terrifying power twisted the air. It even cut off a few strands of her hair. Wei Wei Bai found that her space power in front of him was like a child without the strength to truss up a chicken. She didn't have the chance to fight back. However, she didn't beg for mercy, nor was she afraid. Her delicate face suddenly revealed a few traces of a sinister smile. She stretched out her hand, and the brutal air cut her flesh. The blood on her fingers splashed onto Zero's inhumanly pure face. The blood condensed into a blood blade, which was a materialized object obtained by the power of the space distortion. The blood blade ruthlessly pierced into his abdomen. However, his skin was unexpectedly thick, and unexpectedly only a little bit of skin was pierced. His blood merged with hers, forming a flirtatious rose color. Wei Wei Bai faintly raised her eyebrows. It seems that I am indeed going to die. The weak are prey to the strong, so it doesn't matter. However, I still have to make you pay a price. After saying that, Wei Wei Bai clasped his calm and pure face. Without hesitation, she bit his lips. Zero. Chapter 2140. This scene was unusually bloody and violent, but it was also mixed with some kind of secret ambiguity. Her usually serious expression was now replaced by a reckless and childish vigor. Her slender fingers were supposed to be holding a pen to record the experimental data. At this moment she was doing an unforgivable, even blasphemous thing to him. Zero stretched out his hand, wanting to push her away. However, he saw her staring straight at him. Her pretty and delicate eyes were slightly downcast, making her look incomparably gentle and beautiful. However, her eyes were burning with a violent and bright flame. She was not afraid of death. Her usual mature appearance was even a disguise. The impulsiveness and brainlessness in her body were even more unintelligent than his childish side. Zero's cold and heartless eyes looked at her coldly, feeling that there was no need to be too calculative with her. So, just as he was about to withdraw his finger. However, it was caught by her and just intertwined. The blood on her fingers spread to his fingertips. The warm blood quickly cooled down. She was very fragrant and soft. Even sweet. However, it was not annoying. Zero frowned slightly, but he heard her whisper in his ear provocatively, "Why don't you continue? Don't you want to kill me?" Zero felt the strength of her fingers, but this kind of strength that wanted to break his fingers had a trace of restrained gentleness. She did not hurt his consciousness. Zero was smart enough to notice this. He lowered his eyes and suddenly said softly, "With your personality, you will be at a disadvantage." His creator, the maintainer of the fledgling complex. There was something wrong with her brain. Perhaps, it was similar to his childish personality. Was that why they got along? Zero's beautiful eyelashes gently drooped and finally covered his golden eyes. He did not sense the real killing intent. He did not have the intention to test her at the beginning. She was harmless. Before Zero fell asleep, he said this to his other personalities. Wei Bai was still bloody. Her hands and feet trembled as she pretended to force herself on him. She did not have enough strength. The blood flowed out and she almost went into shock due to excessive blood loss. Suddenly she felt that something was wrong. Wei Bai looked at Zero with some darkness in front of her eyes. Zero also stared at her blankly. A hint of confusion appeared in his sky-blue eyes, as if he didn't understand what was wrong with him. She didn't understand what was wrong with Wei Bai. Wei Bai immediately softened her tense nerves. She happily held his face and kissed him randomly. "Fourth, why you're back." The system was turning over the tourniquet when it heard Wei Bai yelling at Fourth Baby. The corners of its mouth twitched. It was fine to just call out the name Fourth Baby in its heart. Wasn't it embarrassing to call out such a tacky name? Only then did Zero realize that he was lying on the table. His clothes were in a mess. His face reeked of blood as well as the lipstick mark left behind by the blood. Zero Primal Chaos had just regained his senses, and he did not have any memory of what had just happened. Sometimes their memories were in common and sometimes they were not. The more powerful one was, the more one would be able to control all the memories. If the higher personality didn't want to share the memory, he wouldn't know what would happen to that personality. Just like now, he finally realized how badly Wei Bai's arm was injured. Zero stared at Bai Wei with his blue eyes that were as tender as a deer's. He said in disbelief, "You're injured? Who was it? Was it the person who had ordered him to sleep?" Zero was at a loss for a moment. He immediately grabbed Wei Bai's arm and a white halo appeared. He began to repair Wei Bai's arm. Chapter 2141. The lost blood couldn't come back, but the repair of the body was quickly completed. There was also a successful ability user who was a healer, but it was as fast as Zero to heal her extremely ugly wound without any side effects. It was almost impossible. Wei Bai was still staring at her fingers, but she found that Siwa's mood was not right. She looked up and saw him biting his lips, his thick eyelashes hanging down, like an abandoned puppy. Zero said in distress, "I hurt you." Although he had no memory, he knew that the aura of the attack came from his own body. Wei Bai narrowed her eyes and reached out to hold his body, taking him into her arms. She was obviously more petite, but Zero looked like a child, seeking warmth in her arms. Bai Wei's cold and slightly ruthless expression eased, and an incomparably gentle smile appeared. "It's okay, it's not your fault. My Zero won't hurt me." The affection was so high. It was worth her being so gentle. The rest of the personalities were all lacking. Zero's body trembled and suddenly buried himself deeper in her arms, reaching out to hug her. He couldn't bear to hug her tightly, but he couldn't bear to not hug her. Wei was so good. Ding Siwa's affection is at 85. Fourth Baby's favorability was so high that it could move heaven and earth. The sullen feeling of being found fault with Bai Dowa was gone. Wei Bai looked at the 85 affection and felt that it was fortunate that there was a small cookie to comfort her heart. Otherwise she would have gone on strike. Zero Siwa personality had been maintained for a long time, while the rest of the personalities seemed to be in long-term sleep. So Wei Bai was happy to get along with the small cookie. It was best for the rest of the personalities to suddenly explode and die, so that it would be beneficial for her to gain affection. Wei Bai opened the textbook. Little Red Riding Hood went through the forest alone and met the big bad wolf. The big bad wolf wanted to trick her into entering the forest. Zero was lying on the bed, his golden hair spread on the pillow, and his soft blue eyes stared at Wei Bai. Wei Bai read the fairy tale before bed while yawning. Zero's fingers stretched out from the quilt and tugged at her clothes. "Wei, you're sleepy, go to sleep." Wei Wei Bai was always very indulgent of Siwa. She yawned and got into the quilt, saying to him, "If you want to change personalities, remember to wake me up," so that she wouldn't be strangled in her sleep by the other kids. Fourth baby reached out and gently touched her soft hair. He smiled and said softly, "Yes, I will protect you." Bai Weiwei closed her eyes and slept. He had lost too much blood today and was already exhausted. Now that he was asleep, he was in a deep sleep. Lay sleep. Calm. He suddenly thought of something. He sneaked out of bed and turned on the virtual computer screen. All sorts of complicated data appeared on the screen, and curiosity appeared in his cute blue eyes. Weiwei thought that he should listen to fairy tales. But he already knew a lot of knowledge. As though he was born with it, his IQ increased rapidly. Zero rested his chin on his hands and looked at the knowledge that was disappearing and appearing quickly. But Weiwei seemed to like him to be a little silly and obedient. So he didn't dare to let her know. He was very big now. So big that the restlessness in his heart had turned into the hormones of adolescence. This was a feeling that he didn't have in the past. It was warm and dry. Chapter 2142. His face turned red and he immediately closed it. But not long after, he secretly opened it again. He looked at it twice and closed it again. Ling couldn't help but cover his face with his hands. He felt that he wasn't a good child. Ling erased all traces of the data on the computer and then slipped into bed. He didn't dare to get too close to Wei Wei Bai. He held his breath as he looked at her sleeping appearance. Her face had lost its color and her lips were soft. She looked a little pale. By the time Zero realized what she was doing, his fingers were already gently caressing her lips. It was like a butterfly in love with a flower, but also greedy. Ling's fingers trembled slightly and he immediately retracted them. Then he turned around and felt like he was that evil wolf. He wanted to deceive Wei Wei, who was as pure as Little Red Riding Hood. Ling hugged his head and curled up into a ball. He was a bad child. But he really wanted her to look at him alone. She was only good to him. Ding, fourth baby's affection has increased to 88. The system hugged the notification device and was drooling as it slept. When it heard the notification, it immediately opened its eyes. It yawned and continued to install the notification device. It thought that the notification device was broken, so it took it out to repair. Fortunately, it was only the shell. It was easy to put it back. The system suddenly realized something and looked at the host and the male lead. It was normal, they were both sleeping. But why did 88 favorable impression points become love points? The system was confused for a while. Forget it, family and love were feelings. It was fine as long as there was affection points. So the system continued to work hard to install the notification device. Bai Weiwei fell into a deep sleep, until the frantic and sharp warning sounds came. She jumped up and immediately rushed to the bathroom to wash up and change. Like a rough man, she came out fully armed in just a few minutes. Ling sat up in a daze while hugging the blanket. He stared blankly with his childish eyes as Wei Wei Bai rushed over and grabbed him for a morning kiss. "I'm going to fight the monster. Be good and don't cause trouble." Fourth baby's personality was too obedient. He probably didn't know how to fight the monster. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai was too lazy to ask him to come along, lest he had to take care of the giant baby on the battlefield. Lingba blinked and pursed his lips as if he wanted to say something. But Wei Wei Bai had already been swept away like a gust of wind. Zero sat on the bed and listened to the sharp warning. Suddenly her expression slowly changed. His eyes, which were about to be stained with gray, suddenly returned to blue. The Zero shrank into a ball and began to tremble violently. He hugged himself tightly. His clothes were drenched in cold sweat, and he covered his face with his hands. "Don't come out. You will hurt her." He would not let anyone hurt her. When he saw that Wei Wei was covered in blood, and that he was the one who had injured her, he knew that he was the only one who had been injured. The monsters in his body wanted to harm Wei Wei as soon as they came out. His golden hair slowly faded into silver. However, it soon turned golden again. Chapter 2143. In the end, this fierce tug-of-war was decided by a calm and rational whisper. "Come back." The blue-eyed, golden-haired, angelic child was stunned. Then, his blonde hair faded and turned into a translucent silver. His eyes were also filled with a cold and sharp gray color. Zero, who was sitting on the bed, suddenly changed. Zero looked around with an expressionless face. Suddenly, he slowly stretched out his fingernails and slid them across the special steel-like wall. The wall was easily crushed by his fingernails. Zero gently raised his neck and stretched lazily. A cold, evil smile appeared on his face. We need food, I know. Zero abruptly got up from the bed and disappeared like a ferocious beast. Wei Wei Bai was commanding the mercenaries to open the protective shield. It was a wave of monsters. This year's wave of monsters seemed to have come early. Bai Weiwei watched as the monsters recklessly crashed into the protective shield and were scorched by it. One by one they continued to crash into it. They were using death to open a path. Weiwei Bai unhurriedly pulled out a silver-white long sword and began to put on her gloves. The girl standing in the sandstorm outside the base had a body like the sword in her hand. Firm and straight. Although there was no need to pretend to be a little white flower in this apocalyptic world. But fighting monsters was also a physical activity. Several monsters suddenly broke through the protective shield and rushed over while howling. Weiwei Bai coldly said to the communicator on her collar, "Prepare to kill." Just as she finished speaking, the system reminded, "The male lead is here, it's Sanhua." Weiwei Bai, Sanhua? The one with a bad temper? Just as she finished speaking, a strong wind suddenly came from behind her. A figure had already appeared in midair. Silver hair fluttered in the air. The young man grinned and reached out to grab a monster's brain. Then there were 2, 3, 4. In an instant more than half of the monsters fell. Weiwei Bai held her sword and felt that she didn't have a chance to show off. This Sanhua's movements were too fast. A huge leading monster fell to the ground. Zero stood on the monster's head. His hands were stained with blood. He snorted with dissatisfaction. "Too weak. I'm starving to death." After he finished speaking, his gray eyes suddenly landed on Weiwei Bai. That feeling of greed, coldness, and recklessness appeared again. Zero suddenly appeared in front of Weiwei Bai. He lowered his head and stared at her with a strange expression. "Are you my creator?" Weiwei Bai looked like she had nothing to live for. "If you say so." Zero frowned in annoyance. "You're smiling like a fool when you're with that little idiot. Why are you so impatient with me?" "Woman, I'm hungry." She was so indulgent towards the little fool and gave him everything. Then he must be hungry. She would definitely feed him. Sanhua's initial favorability was 25. With such a high favorability, it proved that his IQ was not high enough. Weiwei Bai regained some patience in front of him. The corner of her mouth twitched. "You're hungry. I'll find you something to eat." Zero slowly revealed a cold and greedy smile. "I'll eat some desserts first." Weiwei Bai, ? Zero had already looked at the mercenaries because the monsters were gone. Weiwei Bai had a bad feeling in her heart. As expected, Zero's next sentence was, "Although humans don't have much energy, it's better than nothing." Weiwei Bai, the target of the man-eating strategy. Goodbye, she wanted to go home. Of course, at this point, the target of her strategy had to kneel down and complete it. Zero was about to attack the humans like a ferocious beast. Weiwei Bai immediately hugged him. She tore open space and fell in. She really had to hand it to these crazy personalities. Except for Little Sweet Cookie, the rest were not normal people. With a boom, Weiwei Bai brought Zero into the confinement room in the laboratory. The specially made walls in this place were very difficult to break open. Then Weiwei Bai planned to leave immediately. However, before she could open a space-time rift, Zero had already grabbed her arm and fiercely pulled her out of the space-time rift. Zero's body was full of wounds caused by the space-time power. He revealed an extremely evil smile. "Woman, you're so fucking biased. You give everything to the little idiot, but you're not even willing to give me a human to eat." Weiwei Bai slowly exhaled. She was speechless at the target in front of her. She felt a headache. It was more irritable than facing the rational and inhumane Dehua. Then she showed a very patient fake smile to Zero. "I'll take you to the monster's nest and let you eat enough, okay?" Zero showed a bit of impatience. He said, "Is there a lot of food there?" Weiwei Bai showed the patience of dealing with the mentally retarded and softly said, "There's a lot." Zero nodded and said mercifully, "Okay, let's go, but I'll eat some desserts first." After saying that, he howled and suddenly bit Weiwei Bai's arm. Weiwei Bai, where did the weapon to kill the personality come from? She had to buy it with 1,000 life points. She couldn't stand this group of crazy people anymore. /D. Chapter 2144. The sharpness of the teeth was much sharper than any scythe. Ling narrowed his eyes and bit her arm, just as he was about to break the bone. Weiwei Bai suddenly said, "If you eat my hand, I will be very weak and will die. I won't be able to take you to the monster's nest." Zero paused, but in the end he struggled to pull his teeth out of her arm. Blood immediately gushed out and Ling immediately lowered his head and licked it with his tongue. Wei Wei Bai's wound quickly healed again. What was his saliva made of? How did the wound heal just by licking it? The four children's abilities were close to the same. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a moment, only to find that Ling strangely stretched out his hand and wiped the blood from his mouth, then licked it. Wei Wei Bai, the feeling of a vampire. Ding Sanhua's favorability has increased to 30. Wei Wei Bai, where did this favorability come from? Even if she had a lot of experience, she couldn't see what made Ling's favorability suddenly increase from this strange scene. Ling comfortably narrowed his eyes, his gray eyes had an extremely comfortable feeling. Your blood, it's so sweet. Wei Wei Bai silently took back her hand. Get lost, you're the sweet one, your whole family is sweet. Ling suddenly hugged her with both hands like a real big cat, squinting his eyes and rubbing her hair. He was tall. When he lowered his head and rubbed her, he was like a well-behaved beast acting spoiled. I like you. Next time when you're facing little fool, you're not allowed to smile, you have to smile at me. Wei Wei Bai sighed tiredly. One target was already tiring enough. The main system must be jealous of her 100% success rate. So it planned to tire her out and end it once and for all. If she suddenly had a chance to see the main system one day, if she didn't secretly kick it, she would be sorry for her miserable experience. Wei Wei Bai turned her head, her eyelashes covered the deep coldness in her eyes. Her face was an unhealthy pale, but there was a delicate sense of fragility. Her voice was calm and gentle. I'll take you to eat. With that, the two of them disappeared. Her spatial power could only carry her alone. Another person who was pulled in would be attacked by the terrifying power. However, Zero didn't feel anything at all. Even the power of space that could injure him at the beginning was quickly rendered useless. That terrifying power was unable to leave a single mark on his skin. The Monster King was still hibernating underground. However, there were already many monsters gathered in the monster's lair. Wei Wei Bai drew her long sword and planned to kill a few monsters for him. In the end, before she could do anything, Zero was like a big wolf dog that had seen meat and suddenly attacked. A bunch of monsters were awoken, but this young man moved through them with ease, as if he was a carnivore in a vegetable garden. After a round of trampling, not many monsters could last more than one round against him. Wei Wei Bai squatted on top of a sleeping flower. She lit a cigarette but didn't smoke. She just watched quietly to reduce her stress. The system even showed her pleasant goat for a few minutes. After all, she was also a human and needed to rest. If her nerves were tense every day, it would be over sooner or later. When Wei Wei Bai lit her third cigarette, she heard the favorability increase again. Ding Sanhua's favorability is at 35. Wei Wei Bai calmly thought for a while before saying with certainty, this Sanhua, it can't be that he's happy because he's full, and then his favorability increased? The system looked at the little monster in the distance who was digging out the monster's brain and nodded in agreement. Chapter 2145. It's very possible. This personality seemed to have an average IQ. There were currently 4 personalities. Dehua was the highest, and he represented absolute rationality. Erhua was charming. This kind of charming personality was all scheming, and scheming represented high IQ. The remaining 2 were a child and a big eater. Basically, they were all brainless. Wei Wei Bai looked at the time, worried that she would wake up the Monster King. After all, the Monster King was still very capable. Wei Wei Bai was about to get up and call him home when she saw Ling running over excitedly with a big green monster. Woman, I'm full. This is a gift for you. Isn't it beautiful? Wei Wei Bai looked at the green-faced, fanged dinosaur in front of her. She was speechless for a while. You can eat it? I'm not hungry. Sanhua bared its teeth. Its beautiful and exquisite face was unusually cute under its wacky expression. Women are so troublesome. You like flowers? Ling saw the beautiful flower under her feet. His eyes lit up and he suddenly flashed his claws. Before Wei Wei Bai could say goodbye, the flower had already been cut open. Ling raised his eyebrows and blew his fingers. I know that women like flowers. I'll give you one. Wei Wei Bai immediately covered her mouth and nose. This flower was not harmful. However, it could not be destroyed because it was filled with aphrodisiac gas. And this gas would stimulate the monster's mania. After all, mated monsters were the strongest. Therefore, when Wei Wei Bai saw the rumbling monsters running over, they became ferocious and terrifying. She immediately held her breath and carried Sanhua into the space. In the blink of an eye, she returned to the confinement room of the laboratory. However, just as she landed, Wei Wei Bai realized that there was something wrong with the person she was carrying. Ling narrowed his eyes and his face was very red. And his gray pupils were so nervous that they were vertical. They were like the eyes of a snake, greedy and fanatical. He stared at Wei Wei Bai and felt that his breath was hot. Suddenly he reached out and jumped onto Wei Wei Bai. He hugged her tightly. Wei Wei Bai wanted to run, but she couldn't cut through the space at all. Sure enough, the abilities of their personalities were somewhat similar. Elder Baby's control over the power of space was better than hers, so the other personalities could also suppress her ability. Wei Wei Bai looked at the youth. His eyes were wide open, and there was no hiding the burning greed in them. Silver hair fell on her body. It was as if an ice-cold snake was trying to wrap itself around her. Zero's voice became hoarse. "You look so sweet." Because he was the object of his fledgling complex, the moment he woke up, his heart was completely cold to this world. Only when he saw her would he feel a faint sense of joy. Now that he looked at her, he was even happier. Zero's expression was like that of a beast, full of naked aggression. Wei Wei Bai cautiously raised her guard. She felt that this Sanwa's attack power was very strong. If they were not careful, they would be killed by him. And he looked like he had been drugged with an aphrodisiac. For the time being, Wei Wei Bai wasn't thinking about how to get a good impression of her. Instead, she was thinking about how to survive. Zero slowly leaned over and stopped her from making any attempt to escape. Chapter 2146. He was in charge of hunting. If the prey wanted to escape, how could it escape his eyes? Zero coaxed softly, like a hunter setting a trap. "Don't move, I won't hurt you. Just let me smell you." The more he liked her, the more tempted he was by her scent. This was his instinct, his genes, and his deep possessiveness. The more he liked her, the more he wanted to devour her. Wei Wei Bai watched as he lowered his head and buried it in her neck. Then she heard his heavy breathing, like a beast letting out a satisfied sigh beside its prey's ear. Then she suddenly felt something sticky appear on her neck. This action made Wei Wei Bai explode. Who could stand this kind of action of being eaten? He was licking her. Wei Wei Bai held her breath and whispered softly. "Zero?" Zero paused and slowly got up, his gray pupils constricting. He was nervous and excited. "You're really the most delicious food I've ever seen." Wei Wei Bai, did she look like a cream cake? Suddenly, the nervousness in Zero's eyes was replaced by confusion. It was as if something was beginning to occupy his mind, making him slow down. Zero gritted his teeth and said discontentedly, "Okay, I'm going back. This time I'm finally full." After Zero finished speaking, he immediately lowered his head and sniffed Wei Wei Bai's face, neck and head. He said to himself, "When I come out next time, I'll give you a better gift. Don't smile at the little fool, you're mine now." His greed came from his instinctive desire. A desire to eat. He wanted to possess anything that he found delicious. It had nothing to do with love, it was just possession. After saying that, his face turned red. He closed his eyes and then opened them again. His hair turned black and his eyes turned golden. Dewa came out. He looked at her indifferently. He stared at the bruises on her face and neck for a few seconds before he reached out and gently wiped them away. But her pale face couldn't be wiped away. Zero said indifferently, "The personality just now was unstable. He was too greedy and irritable. I will restrain the number of times he comes out." Unless he was overly hungry, he would usually restrain his hunger-type personality from appearing. That personality had an obvious flaw. The more you like someone, the more nightmarish it is for that person. Fortunately, the hungry personality only had a good impression of Wei Wei Bai, and it wasn't to the point where it couldn't be dealt with. Bai Wei Wei reached out and pushed him. "Don't come out, it's enough to let my child out." Zero paused. There was a bit of surprise in his calm golden eyes. "Child?" Wei Wei Bai sneered. "He's the child I raised. I created Zero. I only acknowledge him. I don't care what you guys are. To me you're all secondary." Zero clearly saw the disdain in her eyes. She really didn't like them. She only liked his weakest personality. It turned out that humans also had a fledgling complex because the first person they met was that personality. Was that why he only liked that personality? Zero pondered for a moment. His emotions rippled a little, but he quickly calmed them down. Then just as he was about to get up, his body went soft and he fell back down. He touched her soft body. The smell of her body was indeed sweet, and it immediately hit his sense of smell. This kind of sweet smell even made people feel suffocated. But it was very delicious. Zero felt that he was affected by the hungry personality. Otherwise, Why would he have the intense feelings of that personality? Chapter 2147. Although he could get all the memories, he could not rationally isolate all the emotional effects. He analyzed that there was a strange substance in his body. It was a substance that he had never seen before. The kind of thing that could completely stimulate mating made his body weak and abnormally hot. It could remove, it could even modify his genes on its own. In the future this thing would not affect him. Reason prevailed in Zero's golden eyes. He was about to get up. But he heard her suddenly sneer. "You've grown up." Zero was still thinking about the meaning of this sentence. She suddenly turned over and pinned him under her. The girl's eyes were sharp and cold. She looked him up and down as if she was talking about something very normal. "Do you need to solve it?" Zero's expression was abnormally calm, but his white skin was dyed red. It was a kind of soul-stirring beauty. That kind of pure rationality was completely destroyed. One could even see that there was a trace of human-like burning in the depths of his beautiful eyes. He seemed to be a little confused, but after thinking for a while, he remembered that his weak personality woke up in the middle of the night to watch those things. Zero did not think that it was a big deal. His voice was incomparably calm. "I can solve it." Wei Bai frowned. "Do you have to look like a holy little angel? Your genetic sequence is clearly close to human, but your behavior is as if I accidentally threw a stone into your nutrition tank and turned you into a piece of marble?" After saying that, Wei Bai pulled open her collar in annoyance. Her face was abnormally pale. But her words were very firm and fast. "If there's a problem, solve it quickly. Then get out of here and return the person I want." After saying that, she grabbed Zero's face. "Anyway, this is very normal. I'll teach you so that you won't be so pitiful that you can only solve it yourself." Zero could have solved her. He even reached out and pushed her away. It was an easy action. But when the woman on top of him showed a beauty that was not even comparable to his bewitching personality, a corner of his rational heart seemed to have collapsed. It seemed that for her it was indeed very easy to do. The moral collapse of the doomsday also made this kind of thing happen everywhere. It was even very normal. It was as simple as drinking water and eating. So she was just like solving a problem, helping him solve this kind of hot thing that he could easily resolve. Zero's cold and self-restrained expression softened bit by bit. His golden eyes, because of the loss of the calm barrier, were actually breathtaking. From the beginning to the end he did not stop her. He was even indulgent, like a wise elder looking at an insensible child. There was a trace of doting in his eyes. At last his fingertips twined around her long hair. He reached out and stroked her hair as if sighing. She was so tired that she fell asleep. Long-term exhaustion and the excessive blood loss during this period of time made her, and she was in a state but to maintain this place she actually held on with all her might. Zero sat up from the ground, and Bai Weiwei's head rested on his lap. She was like a baby. His sleeping appearance was unbelievably fragile. Zero looked at her silently. He slowly reached out and parted her hair. Then he lowered his head and imprinted a holy kiss on her forehead. Under the cold white light, his golden hair spread all over the floor, and his slender and beautiful back had a beautiful luster under the light. Like a god. "Go to sleep. I will let that child out." Originally he did not want that weak personality to appear again, because that personality liked her too deeply. This kind of feeling would affect all personalities, including him. But since she was begging, he would treat it as her coming back to her senses. He promised her once. Ding, Dewa's favorability is at 20. Chapter 2148. When Wei Bai woke up, her legs were no longer sore, her waist was no longer painful, and she even felt energized. She rubbed her bird's nest hair and realized that her sleeves were a little too long. She then realized that her clothes were new, and she had taken a shower. Her body was clean and fragrant. Wei Bai looked at the male clothes on her body that were obviously taken from the supplies room. Her mind went blank and she tried to recall. She then thought of something and looked around. She went from the isolation room to her own room. And Wei Bai looked down at her side, and a beautiful golden hair spilled out from under the blanket. Some of the hair even fell to the side of the bed. Wei Bai rolled up her sleeves and carefully opened the blanket. She found Zero sleeping on his side, his fingers still entwined with her hair. Because she had not had a haircut for a long time, her hair had grown past her waist. So when she sat up, her hair was not pulled by him. Wei Bai looked at his smooth and beautiful shoulders under the blanket, and the vaguely discernible bamboo-like collarbone. She finally put the blanket back on as if she was covering a corpse. She wanted to cover him completely. Then she knocked her head. What did I do yesterday? The system said, I looked at the bullet screen for a long time but I really don't know. But when you went to the monster's lair yesterday, you seemed to have inhaled some estrus material. I was about to remind you but I was blocked. Wei Bai remembered yesterday she had suppressed Zero's primary personality, and that inhumane black-haired young man had done whatever he wanted. Yes, she had done whatever she wanted to him. However, the primary personality did not push her away. He even allowed her to give him a vivid lesson on the physiology of puberty. Wei Bai rubbed her face helplessly. I've been too nervous recently, and with the oppressive atmosphere of the apocalypse, Zero's 4 personalities are exhausted, so I inhaled some estrus material yesterday, and that's why I suddenly exploded. Yes, if it was normal. That little amount of estrus material was not enough to make her lose control. But yesterday, it was obvious that she had been too tired and lost too much blood, causing her brain to not work properly. Plus, Zero's ascetic primary personality, it was annoying. If he wasn't careful, he would force himself on her. Wei Bai, I think he can stop me so I can't be considered as rape at most. The system? If you think it is. He could not see it and he did not dare to say it. If he said it, the bullet screen. The system said, but you still need to drink more blood tonic, your mental state was affected yesterday. Bai Weiwei rested her chin on her hand with a calm expression. No, I'm in good physical condition today. Sure enough, I relaxed after being nervous for a while. I didn't suffer a loss. The system was shocked. Host, your bottom line has actually reached such a low level? Although her bottom line had always been very low, she was thick-skinned. However, the system felt that when it came to men and women, she was still a little conservative in her heart. In the past, when her first kiss was gone, she was still so shy and fussy about every little thing. You still? Now he was actually casually saying, XX, to relax his mind. The system felt that its worldview had been overturned again. Wei Bai was stunned for a moment, then said calmly, oh, bottom line. Maybe it's because I don't have that thing anymore after the price of the substitute sticker increased. How many worlds had it been? The system was still thinking about her bottom line? Could she exchange for life points with that thing? Yes, let's exchange it. The system responded reluctantly, can you relax with anyone? Crossover system, Prince Charming, come here. Crossover system, Prince Charming, come here. / crossover system, Prince Charming, come here. Crossover system, Prince Charming, come here. Download the at https://m. Sashu. Com button crossover system, Prince Charming, come here. Comma. Chapter 2149. Wei Bai sneered, how is that possible? Other than the targets, I feel disgusted by everyone. Speaking of which, Wei Bai suddenly frowned, that's strange. Although each plane has a different target, I don't know why I feel that I can relax when I find the target, but as long as I think of other people. The system's face twitched. What was with the soul compatibility? There were so many planes. Even if their personalities and bodies were different, the soul compatibility was terrifyingly high. Yi Yuxuan's soul fragment also didn't recognize Wei Bai. But no matter what Wei Bai's personality or appearance was, she was still instinctively attracted to him. Of course, Wei Bai was the same. Her brain, rationality, and analysis couldn't recognize the constantly changing Yi Yuxuan. But the soul had recognized her long ago. Of course, the body didn't reject it. Instead of saying that the soul fragment fell in love with the person played by Wei Bai, it was better to say that they fell in love with the same soul. Of course, the system didn't dare to say this. It had to break them up in the future. At that time, if Wei Bai knew that her targets were the same person, and fell in love with Yi Yuxuan in reality, then he would not only be destroyed by Yi Yuxuan. The host would probably beat him into a pig's head. It was really the only system in history to be able to do this. Wei Bai thought for a while, just when the system was worried that she thought of something. She sighed calmly, forget it, why think so much? Just relax. The system, as expected, the host had no bottom line. Suddenly the blanket moved and the fluffy Zero crawled out of the blanket. He half closed his eyes in a daze, and there was a trace of satisfaction on his face. It was as if he had a very beautiful dream. He saw Wei Bai sitting, her long hair draped over her shoulders, half of her face hidden in the shadows, half bright and delicate, and half indifferent and peaceful. She was wearing a long-sleeved mail jacket, looking down at him. After a while, Zero realized that he wasn't wearing any clothes. His face immediately turned red and his eyelashes trembled. When he reached out, he realized that his fingers were covered with her hair. He clenched his fists, but he didn't dare to use too much force. He was worried that he would hurt her, so he loosened his fingers and let her hair fall onto the bed. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were indifferent. "You're awake. Get up and eat." These calm words, this face of a scumbag who did not recognize him last night. Zero was also at a loss. Although she was shy, she didn't know what was wrong with her. Wei Wei Bai observed Zero's expression and confirmed that the memories of the main personality were different. That was fine too. Otherwise, it would have been too unkind of her to force herself on the primary personality yesterday. After Wei Wei Bai finished speaking, she got off the bed and changed her clothes. Zero got up and wrapped herself in the blanket. Her blank face was soft, and her blue eyes were pure and shy. He glanced at Wei Wei Bai and pursed his lips. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. Apart from shyness, he also felt sad. Wei Wei Bai didn't feel burdened at all. Anyway, see what and remember what happened yesterday, right? Also, as psychics they had good stamina. After so much trouble yesterday, there were almost no traces left today. Also, their bodies weren't tired. Other than forgetting to put on his clothes, there was basically no evidence. After Wei Wei Bai put on his clothes, she turned around and saw Siwa with his head lowered. The tips of his ears were red, and his fingers were nervously clutching the blanket. Suddenly he said something softly. His voice was too soft to hear clearly. Wei Wei Bai looked at him in confusion. "What's wrong?" Zero finally looked up and asked nervously, "Could you be pregnant, Wei Wei?" Chapter 2150. Wei Wei Bai felt a chill on her back. Was Zero still thinking about the child's name? She could give birth to a ghost. No, she couldn't even give birth to a ghost. Bai Wei Wei rubbed her goosebumps on her arms and didn't continue to think about the child. Anyway, it was just a night of relaxation. Young people would make this kind of mistake. As for the child, there was no need to think too much about it. Wei Wei Bai threw a bucket of life source to Zero. After eating and drinking, she dragged him to train. Zero's ability hadn't been tested yet. But the way he killed the monsters last time shocked the people in the base. It was the first time they saw a psychic chasing after a group of monsters. Even psychics couldn't take the initiative to this extent when facing a monster tide. Fourth baby was the weakest. Wei Wei Bai dragged him to the base square. There was a special barrier here. It was the place where the mercenary group fought and trained. When she brought Zero to the square, everyone fell silent. A girl with a serious face, but she was definitely not old. He was standing at the edge of the square with a slender but thin blonde youth. It looked like a weak combination, but it made people take a step back. After all, everyone knew that they were the last two psychics in the base. They were also the strongest. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the light screen in the training ground. She pointed and said, "Attack that light shield. It will record your strength." Zero obediently reached out and flashed to the light shield. He didn't use much strength and hit it. Then the light shield broke. It was like a chain reaction. A series of light shields also broke. For any human, the defense of the light shield was invincible. Even psychics could use it to test how strong they were. If they didn't use special abilities, they couldn't break this thing. Zero saw that the light shield broke and immediately retreated to Wei Wei Bai's side. He lowered his head and tugged at Wei Wei Bai's clothes. "Do I have to pay for it? I didn't do it on purpose. I was very light." He felt that the light shield was very weak and had already reduced his strength, but it still broke. "Wei Wei Bai, where's the weakest personality that only knows how to cry?" Next, she let Zero try a few more things. In the end, without exception, everything he touched shattered. No wonder the monster's head was like tofu pudding under his fingernails. This kind of power had already surpassed the limits of human beings. No matter how powerful an Esper was, he was still a human. He could only stimulate the limits of a human's abilities. But Zero's ability was clearly not that of a human. When it was time for lunch, Wei Wei Bai dragged him along to test her skills. She discovered that his strength could allow him to survive in the apocalypse. She waved her hand. "Let's go back." It was similar to calling a puppy. Like a puppy, Zero immediately wagged its tail and tugged at Wei Wei Bai's clothes to leave with her. After they left, everyone in the square began to tremble. It was too scary just now. As for the leader of the mercenary group, he thought that the human base had lost so many superpowered people and Wei Wei Bai was too young. He felt that there was no future for the base and planned to leave with his mercenary group. But today he was suddenly glad that he didn't leave. Zero was such a terrifying weapon. If he was his enemy, he would definitely die. What was even more terrifying was that Wei Wei Bai could actually make such a terrifying monster listen to her. Wei Wei Bai took care of Zero for a long time. They were together almost every day. She also sent him out on some missions. She found that the completion rate was very high and it was very easy. What Wei Wei Bai found strange was that the other personalities seemed to be in a deep sleep, leaving only fourth baby to jump around. Could it be that the master was really so kind? She said that she liked fourth baby, so he really only let fourth baby out? She originally wanted to use this period of time to raise the favorability of one personality to the maximum. But the strange thing was that the favorability didn't change. Wei Wei Bai tried a few times. She even kissed him good morning and good night, but Zero's favorability didn't increase at all. Although 88 favorable impression points were auspicious. But she liked 100 more. A month passed unhurriedly. Wei Wei Bai flipped through the documents of the base. Next to her, Zero was lying on the table, staring at her with a gentle but deep gaze. But every time she looked up, the deep gaze in his eyes would disappear. It turned into a bright smile. Wei Wei Bai thought calmly. Why didn't the favorability increase? Could it be that it was harder to increase it later? Suddenly she felt a wave of nausea. Wei Wei Bai suddenly got up and rushed to the bathroom. Zero's pupils shrank and he immediately followed. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale. She felt very uncomfortable. What was going on? Zero looked nervous and ran over with a warm water. Wei Wei, are you still feeling uncomfortable? At the beginning all children are like this. Wei Wei Bai took the warm water and rinsed her mouth. Then she denied. I'm still thinking about the child. It's impossible. Zero blinked. Then he suddenly picked her up and rushed out. Let's go see a doctor. Wei Wei Bai felt that she had eaten overnight food and had food poisoning. But when the test results came out, congratulations, you're pregnant for a month. Wei Wei Bai in the system, huh? What the hell? What happened to infertility? //T. Chapter 2151. Confusion, Shock and Disbelief. This was the feeling that Wei Wei Bai and the system shared. When Zero heard that she was pregnant, his eyes were blank for a moment, but that beautiful blue was slowly replaced by a happy and beautiful light. Although the main personality would not lie. It even said that there was a high probability that she would have a child. But he still didn't feel anything substantial and even needed a month. Wei Wei didn't feel anything strange, so he thought that there wouldn't be this time. Child, his and Wei Wei's child. Zero suddenly smiled. His smile was very cute and silly. He reached out and hooked his arm around the girl who had been staring blankly at the test results. One finger, following the gap between her fingers. As if he wanted to grab happiness, he carefully and gently held her fingers. So happy. Ding, fourth baby's favorability is at 90. Wei Wei Bai looked at him blankly, but didn't have much of a reaction. Then she continued, fiddling with the examination machine and checked again. But the robot's voice was still so stiff and calm. Congratulations, you are pregnant. In fact, there was even an additional select button. Do you want to choose the pregnancy precautions? Wei Wei Bai immediately clicked no and then said to Zero, I'm going to be alone, don't follow me. There were so many planes she thought that a storm was coming. When she saw the word pregnant, her mind went blank. The system was flipping through the information, and it also checked Wei Wei Bai's body. How could she be pregnant? A host who had transmigrated planes couldn't be pregnant. This was simply beyond his imagination. It had been so many years since he was born, plus the history of the system world. There wasn't a single pregnancy incident. Unless the host was forced to stay in the plane and it was certain that they couldn't be saved, then they could be forced to change their body by the power of the plane. Only then there was the possibility of pregnancy. Otherwise, wait, forced to stay in the plane? The system immediately sped up the examination. What he checked was different from what the robot checked, but to check Wei Wei Bai's soul. Sure enough, there was a sticky force. Golden, sticky force. The male lead of this plane was too strong. Not only was he strong, but he also had 4 personalities. It was way more difficult than the usual strategy. If it was a normal raid target, the reward would be 30 HP. In that case, this plane was at least of high difficulty, and the reward would be 10 times more valuable. But the plane was still stuck at normal difficulty. Had some kind of power tampered with the plane they had transmigrated to? Ling watched as Wei Wei Bai left. He wanted to follow her, but he didn't dare to. He could only walk around hesitantly. What should he do? Wei Wei was pregnant. Having a child would make one weak. It was similar to superpowers. Superpowers would also be affected. She wouldn't be angry, right? Because she would feel weak. In the apocalypse, a weak person was equivalent to a person waiting for death. Zero clenched his fists tightly. He would protect her. Suddenly his expression changed. His hair turned grayish-blue, and his eyes turned a bewitching reddish-brown. The bewitching beauty on his originally pure face blossomed with a dense evil aura. Pregnant. Without waiting for the personality change, Zero's eyes turned blue again. His blue eyes were no longer light, but a deep and gloomy blue. There was even a trace of hostility. Get in, don't think of hurting her. The main personality didn't suppress him. Even if he was the weakest, he would never compromise with the other personalities. Chapter 2152. Weiwei was pregnant and was at her most vulnerable. He would fight to the death with anyone who dared to hurt her. His pupils trembled violently, and the pain made him sweat profusely. His muscles were twitching. But in the end, his hair turned completely golden, and his eyes returned to their light blue color. Ling stood in place, sweating profusely. The gentle gentleness on his face was replaced by a cold determination. His fingers dug into the flesh of his palm. Although it healed quickly, there were still traces of blood on his fingernails. This mark reminded him that he had just experienced a lot of fierce battles and defenses. Ling panted and slowly calmed his stiff body. After a long time he relaxed his expression. Then he raised his head again and showed the harmless, soft and innocent smile that Weiwei liked the most. Ling went through a lesson on what to pay attention to after pregnancy. He was going to be a father now. So he had to start learning how to protect the mother of the child. Weiwei Bai's fingers trembled as she took out a cigarette. Wait, pregnant women can't smoke. So she put the cigarette back. Weiwei Bai felt that she had not seen enough, or else why would she be scared by pregnancy? It was just pregnancy. It was just a child, right? It was more. The child. The child. What should she do? The host was about to go berserk and turn into a giant dinosaur, spitting fire everywhere. The system finally checked and shouted, "Don't worry, you won't be able to give birth." Weiwei Bai, the system emphasized, "Really, I guarantee that you won't be able to give birth." Weiwei Bai, this line feels so scary, so evil and so dark. The system said, the male lead of this world is too much. His ability should be considered S difficulty level in the system world, but the missions we do are all in easy mode, and very few of them are in medium difficulty. So our ability is not compatible with the male lead's ability. In fact, after transmigrating to this world, the sudden change in the male lead was also very confusing. The system said, that's why he can change your body and break half of the rules of transmigration. Weiwei Bai frowned, is that so? Did something go wrong with the transmigration? This was a very bad thing. In the past, he had always relied on the omniscience and omnipotence of the system, as well as all kinds of rules that were not wrong. Once the system made a mistake, the difficulty of her strategy would increase exponentially. The system said, but the rules of your body haven't changed. You can't leave behind life in this plane. This is a hard and fast rule. Even if you can get pregnant, you can't give birth. The child in your belly is actually a virtual product. Weiwei Bai didn't think that there was anything wrong with her IQ. Why couldn't he understand this explanation? The system tried its best to explain, that is, although the male lead changed your body causing you to have to get pregnant, it conflicts with your setting of not being able to leave a life behind. The two powers are currently in a state of conflict, causing the child in your stomach to look real, but in reality, it has already been killed off by the rules. Weiwei Bai, was her stomach a square? Anyone could come in and fight? The system said, so you don't have a child now, but it looks like you do. Of course, you will be pregnant for 10 months and give birth to an air ball, or you can stuff a durian coconut, and then you will give birth to this. Weiwei Bai suddenly remembered that there was a plane where she couldn't give birth either. //. Chapter 2153. Although she could simulate a pillow. But in that world she wasn't even pregnant. It was just a simulation. And now her state was indeed pregnant, but there was no child. Wasn't this the legendary fantasy fake pregnancy? The system suddenly looked serious. But this time the rules won, but next time it may not be. So in this world, you must not have any physiological activities with the male lead. You must not. If there was a next physiological lesson, the power of the rules no longer had the ability to stop it, she would definitely get pregnant. Weiwei Bai was silent for a long time before she understood. Okay, I understand. The system was getting more and more unreliable. All kinds of tricks to cheat the host. Wei Wei Bai knew that it was a fake pregnancy. Although she felt a little regretful, she was more relaxed. If she really had a child, what would she do in the future? She had to leave. Leave the child here? Then wouldn't she be a scumbag and a scumbag mother? Forget it, she had to have a child in reality. She must not have one in this world. Bai Weiwei suddenly felt nauseous again. She rushed to the bathroom and vomited out her bile. This morning sickness was the real deal without any discount. Suddenly, a gentle hand appeared on her back. He patted her gently, his blue eyes full of worry. Weiwei, your reaction is a little big. Are you very uncomfortable? Weiwei Bai was too lazy to think about where Zero came from. After she rinsed her mouth and washed her face, she said, I'm fine, I'm fine. At least she didn't have to worry about what to do if the child was really born. No, she knew that the child was fake. Just hit her directly. Vomiting like this made her feel uncomfortable. This was the end of the world. She was lying flat, not at the mercy of others. Zero gently and strongly hugged her, as if he was carrying a princess, and put her on the bed. His innocent and naive expression had a few more wisps of wisdom and maturity. Although his appearance didn't change, she could feel that he was no longer that naive and sweet. He almost knelt on one knee by the bed, holding her hand with both hands, and promised seriously, Don't be afraid, leave the future to me. At this point, Zero's thick eyelashes lifted slightly, revealing the determination and seriousness in his eyes. Other than the knowledge of pregnancy, I have also learned the knowledge of childbirth. When the time comes, I will help you deliver the baby. When Weiwei Bai saw that he looked like he was going to be a father, she was worried that the greater the expectations, the greater the disappointment. So after thinking for a while, she reached out and touched his hair. I'm not ready yet. Zero squinted his eyes in comfort and said, It's okay. I'll be a good father. If you're not ready, I can even play the role of a mother. How could this child not be so serious and pure? Weiwei Bai's mouth twitched. She really didn't have the face to say that she wanted to hit him. Once he said that he was worried, her favorability towards him immediately dropped to zero. Zero reached out and carefully hugged her waist. He rested his face on her thigh. This was a posture of incomparable dependence. Weiwei Bai, on the other hand, was thinking about finding an opportunity to make the air egg in her stomach. Pregnancy was simply too unbearable. During this period of time, Weiwei Bai was still thinking about how to get rid of the air egg. She began to feel extremely weak. The system explained faintly, the male lead's ability is too strong. Even if it's fake, the remaining power is still desperately trying to exploit your energy. Weiwei Bai frowned and looked at some pregnant women's medicine and sour pregnant women's fruits that Zero brought. He even personally went to find the ingredients to cook. He didn't allow her to eat the sticky nutrient solution. As a father, Zero was really responsible. Chapter 2154. She was on standby almost 24 hours a day. Moreover, as her body was getting weaker, she actually started to feel sleepy. She fell into a deep sleep almost as soon as she laid down. Seeing Weiwei Bai close her eyes and fall asleep again, Zero frowned. Although it was normal for pregnant women to feel sleepy in the early stages. However, Weiwei Bai's body was abnormally weak. Zero reached out and touched her stomach. He could feel the beating of life inside. It seemed a little lively. This was different from the knowledge in the knowledge manual for pregnant women. Zero thought for a moment, pursed his lips, and made a decision. He closed his eyes and his blonde hair suddenly turned black. His expression instantly turned cold and calm. His eyelashes fluttered. A golden light appeared in his eyes. Zero's hand was still on her stomach. There seemed to be some fluctuations in Zero's calm eyes. He seemed to be at a loss, but in the end there was a gentleness. Was it a child? He stared at the child in her stomach for a while, and his golden eyes darkened. After a while, the gentleness in his deep golden eyes disappeared bit by bit. He regained his calmness. He sat beside her and listened to her light breathing. Finally, he covered his eyes and slowly closed them. His thin lips moved slightly. You're a little lively, but it's okay. Eat more nutritious food and the child will be born smoothly. The child would be born. The desire for children was an innate genetic inheritance. Therefore, Zero told everyone to protect the child's birth. Then he suppressed the other personalities and let the weakest one continue to appear. In fact, he had already planned to digest this personality, because his love for Weiwei Bai had already surpassed that. However, Weiwei Bai was pregnant. Pregnant women could not be stimulated, so he could only let this personality continue to exist. Weiwei Bai slept until her head was spinning. When she woke up, she saw Zero waiting for her with breakfast. He saw that she had woken up, a basin of warm water, a towel, and a toothbrush. Everything had been prepared. Zero blinked his blue eyes. Wei Wei, I'll help you brush your teeth and wash your face. Wei Wei Bai immediately refused. I'll do it myself. I'm not crippled. Zero was like a little husky wagging its tail, circling around her excitedly. After you fell asleep yesterday, I helped you take care of all the matters in the base. Recently, there have been mercenary groups that have gone out to kill monsters. I've also sent people to help. As for the monster horde, you don't have to worry, I'll take care of it. He would protect her base. In this apocalypse, he would let the entire world know that this was the safest paradise. Wei Wei Bai nodded indifferently. She was also disgusted in the morning and her body was soft. Was pregnancy that scary? How could his body be so weak? Seeing that she had finished washing up, Zero immediately fed her with a spoon. This is to suppress the nausea. Wei Wei Bai held it in her mouth. It was sweet and sour and it was especially cool and delicious. The discomfort in his body was immediately relieved. Wei Wei Bai relaxed her brows and Zero immediately smiled happily. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for the 1,000th and 100th time. Fuck, why did I suggest to hit the air eggs? Looking at this loyal little puppy's face, I can't bring myself to say it. After dinner, Wei Wei Bai went for a walk. The loyal little puppy pulled on the corner of her clothes and happily followed her. When the two big shots of the base came out for a walk, everyone seemed to be more diligent. As they walked, Wei Wei Bai felt that something was wrong. She turned around and saw that the loyal little puppy was walking and nodding. Nodding and closing his eyes, he was taking a nap. Wei Wei Bai asked suspiciously, "Wait, isn't he sleeping?" Chapter 2155. The system said, ever since he found out you were pregnant, he has never closed his eyes. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. It had been at least more than a week. He had not died yet? Ling suddenly raised his head and opened his eyes, looking very confused. Then his eyes were filled with gray and irritable greed appeared. His hair turned silver gray, like moonlight pouring down on him. He slowly curved his lips exaggeratedly and crazily. I've been hungry for a long time, damn it, why didn't you let me out? Wei Wei Bai looked at the loyal little dog behind her, who had turned into a berserk dog. She rubbed her nose uncomfortably and kept looking at fourth baby. The sudden appearance of third baby was especially shocking. The berserk dog's gray eyes were almost vertical, and he shook off Wei Wei Bai's clothes. Then he stretched. Okay, I'm going to hunt. The place last time was not bad. Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something and stared at Wei Wei Bai fiercely. Woman, what do you mean you're pregnant, you have a baby? Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. She looked at him up and down and suddenly felt like she could hit an egg on the air. No, you're wrong, I'm not pregnant. After she finished speaking, she immediately took a few steps back, and took the opportunity to solve this problem when third baby came out. Otherwise, when fourth baby came out, she would not be able to say anything when his sad and loyal face looked at her. Third baby snorted in disdain. I saw the thing in your stomach, so troublesome, I have to take responsibility for boss. Forget it, it's the same body anyway. After he finished speaking, he suddenly rushed over. He picked up Bai Wei Wei and quickly disappeared from where he was. He came to the monster's nest last time and put her on a harmless leaf. Wait, I'll talk after I'm full. After he finished speaking, he disappeared. Wei Wei Bai almost rolled her eyes, I'll eat you to death. She saw third baby leave and said to the system, quick, let's go back and solve this. She was too weak and she did not want to keep being pregnant. But when she raised her hand she found, where was her ability? The system said, you don't have enough energy in your body so your superpower is gone. Wei Wei Bai, that's not right. Which pregnant woman drains energy so quickly like me? What am I pregnant with? Although it was fake, the energy was real. So her pregnancy was exactly the same as in reality. The system said, the male lead's energy is very strong. I'm now calculating the effect of this speed of exploitation on your body. Wei Wei Bai suddenly saw the silver-haired Sanhua suddenly appear in front of her like a small beast baring its teeth and brandishing its claws. He looked her up and down, his sharp eyes carrying a terrifying heat that was like a raging fire. Then he lowered his head and sniffed the side of her neck, his teeth nibbling. Her scent was so appealing to him. I really want to bite him. However, when he thought about her pregnancy, his brain, which was usually filled with hunger, finally had some common knowledge about pregnancy. That was what the weakest personality learned every day. Because he was the weakest, all of his memories were shared. Although the other three did not come out, their minds were filled with pregnancy knowledge every day. And she had become weak, very weak. It was as if a gentle touch would kill him. Really, so troublesome? Zero narrowed his eyes and suddenly hugged her, his voice low and hoarse. Let's go, I'm full. After that, they disappeared. Wei Bai was back at the base in the blink of an eye. Zero put her on a chair and then pulled out a bunch of beautiful wild fruits from God knows where. Download the at https://m/sashu.com at the bottom to record this chapter. The next time you open the bookshelf, you will be able to see it. If you like. Chapter 2156. This thing is very nutritious, I'm not a vegetarian, you can have it. After saying that, his sharp gray eyes showed a hint of blue. Zero frowned impatiently, his voice even a little sharp. Are you worried that I'll kill her? Do you think you're the only one who knows how to protect people? After he finished speaking, Zero looked up at Bai Weiwei, and his movements were a little more bashful. Call me if there's nothing to eat, I'll definitely share some with you when I'm full. Pregnant women will starve to death if they don't have anything to eat. After saying that, Zero closed his eyes and fell to the ground. Ding, Sanhua's favorability has increased to 40. So Sanhua came out to show his attitude as a father? The favorability actually increased. Wei Bai looked at the wild fruits on the ground, then looked at Zero who was sleeping like a dead pig. Just because she was pregnant, the favorability increased. Was it really the best strategy to take the ball? Wei Bai was thinking about how much favorability the air egg could get when her eyelids became heavy. Sleepiness made her close her eyes. On the ground, Zero only closed his eyes for a few minutes, then suddenly opened them. His gray eyes turned into a charming reddish-brown. He slowly got up, revealing a demonic smile that could make people go crazy. His lazy voice could seduce people. What a pity you're pregnant. He got up and came to her side, lazily holding his chin, squinting at Wei Bai for a long time. Then he gently kissed her without any seduction. Consider this a gift for you, boss is so cruel, he actually made you pregnant. Wei Bai seemed to feel something and opened her eyes vigilantly. She found that the fruits on the ground were still by her feet, and there was a bouquet of beautiful red roses on her lap. It looked like it had just been picked. Wei Bai asked the system, who gave it to me? The system said, Erwa, when you were asleep, Erwa gave you flowers, Dewa came out to touch your stomach, then Siwa woke up to make lunch for you. Wei Bai suddenly felt the benefits of being a mother. Didn't this group of bastards look down on her? He had an empty stomach, so why was he suddenly so attentive to her? Wei Bai tried to say, why don't we hold on for another 2 months before we consider aborting it? The system joked, 2 months might not be enough. You have to hold on until the production. Wei Bai seriously considered this plan. Seeing that she was seriously considering it, the system decided to pull the host back a little. Don't drag the time until the birth. Otherwise, how are you going to explain the birth of an empty balloon? Wei Bai narrowed her eyes and rubbed her chin like a profiteer. Are there any dolls in the supermarket that can be children? The kind of robot child that can grow up, talk and take exams? The system replied, yes, but it's a little expensive. Wei Bai asked sensitively, how much HP? The system replied, even the cheapest one costs 5,000 HP. Wei Bai gasped. It's too expensive. Is there anything else? The system replied, it's the cheapest one. There's really nothing else that can replace it. Wei Bai suddenly asked, can you become a child? The system blurted out, I'm just like a child now. I'm cuter now. Wei Bai hesitated. Can you pretend to be a child when the time comes? The system was speechless. Wei Bai said, just pretend for a while. If you can't pretend anymore after the birth, you can kill yourself. The system was speechless. Giving birth to a child and giving birth to a system is just a joke. It's not realistic. Wake up, host. Where's your backbone? You have to rely on yourself. What's the point of relying on a child? No, rely on the system. Have some shame. Download the at https://m/sashu.com below to record this chapter. Chapter 2157. In the end, Wei Bai didn't really give birth to a system, and then let the system pretend to commit suicide. But the action of hitting the air ball delayed her until a month later. About 2 months ago. Mention this kind of thing again and must mention it to Dewa. Wei Bai looked at Zero's back facing her, and his voice was very calm as he gave the order. The matters of the base were all taken care of by him. Because she was pregnant, the base was closed for the time being. There was no conflict with any base. But whoever dared to provoke them would be destroyed. Wei Wei Bai held a cup of milk. The milk was processed by the wild fruit juice, and the taste didn't make her nauseous. She looked up at Zero. The teenager was a few centimeters taller, and the shirt he was wearing was also brand new. If she hadn't reminded him, he probably forgot to throw away the label of supplies on it. The beautiful back was slightly bent, and the soft couch of the shirt line was a little more supported. It looked even more tall and strong. Fourth baby was no longer soft and fluffy like before. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyelashes and thought calmly. Before she finished drinking the milk, a hand gently held her wrist, very soft, as if worried that she would be frightened. Zero squatted, gently touching her soft body. Under the delicate and beautiful eyelashes, a pair of sky-blue eyes were unusually pure. He whispered softly, "There's no more milk, I'll pour some for you. When the wild fruit juice is finished, I'll go out and pick some." This was the super nutritious food produced in the monster's nest. Ability users didn't dare to enter the monster's nest, but for a few wild fruits. Zero calculated the time when to pick a few baskets. In addition, he was afraid that freezing would affect the taste, so he picked fresh every time. Wei Wei Bai smiled and reached out to rub his hair. Sure enough, she saw him squint comfortably. Ding, fourth baby's favorability is at 93. During this time of getting along, the favorability would increase from time to time. It seemed to be the accumulation of favorability in life. This was the model of loving you a little bit more every day. Wei Wei Bai finished the milk and drank a cup of wild fruit juice. The air in her stomach finally stopped tormenting her. If it weren't for this kind of old nest wild fruit, she would probably be disgusted to death by morning sickness this month. After Wei Wei Bai finished drinking, she fell asleep again. This time she had a nightmare. She dreamed that Dewa suddenly appeared and looked at her coldly. They were in a blank space. There was almost no emotion in Zero's golden eyes. His fingers gently caressed her stomach. His cold voice sounded a little more human. "Is it very uncomfortable?" he asked in a low voice. Wei Wei Bai felt that this dream was strange, but she didn't let herself go easily because of the dream. Therefore she revealed a gentle smile. "There's nothing I can do about it. Which mother doesn't feel uncomfortable? But the child is the most important." Zero's fingers paused slightly. He lowered his head, and his black hair fell on both sides of his fair face. His expression was still holy and calm. After a long time he seemed to sigh. "You've worked hard. After the child is born, I will set up a merit monument for you." Wei Wei Bai, what era is this antique from? There was indeed a merit monument in the early days of the apocalypse. It was for those heroes who made a great contribution to saving the apocalypse but failed in the end. It's been hundreds of years. Who still remembers about the merit monument? Even if Dewa is dreaming, he's still super old-fashioned. Chapter 2158. Wei Wei Bai reached out and very calmly and boldly wrapped her arms around his neck. Then she sat in his arms like a big cat. She reached out and twirled his hair unhurriedly. The golden strands of hair coiled around her fingertips. It was so beautiful that it was like sunlight flowing. Zero's face, which was as white as snow, had a few more strange fluctuations. His calm golden eyes also reflected her casual and languid face. She was really not afraid of him. She was not afraid that he would hurt her. Wei Wei Bai imitated fourth baby's soft smile, and there was no trace of coldness in her eyes. It was also the first time Zero saw her face him like this. This kind of soft and defenseless appearance was only seen by the weakest personality. Her breathing was a little weak, but it carried the scent of her body. It smelled very good and did not cause him to reject it. Zero let her do as she pleased. It was as if an adult was indulging an insensible child, and there was always a little more restraint and tolerance. Wei Wei Bai found a comfortable position, reached out and hugged his waist, and buried her head in his neck. She even thought that his hair was too long and brushed it away for him. Her breath blew on the skin of his neck. It was soft and full of vitality. It was like the fragrance of a wild tree. Just when Zero thought that she was just looking for a position to sleep, Wei Wei Bai, who only thought that she was dreaming, could be sleeping in a dream. She could only dream if she was asleep. Wasn't it a waste of energy to dream that she was sleeping? So she was like a kitten, gently teasing him, and her breath became heavier. "Zero, what name do you plan to give your child?" Except for fourth baby, the rest of the children were all scumbags. So Wei Wei Bai used this to tease him. Zero was silent, as if this question was beyond his ability. After a long time he reacted. "It depends on what ability he has. My body is very corrosive, and most of the child's genetic inheritance will be robbed, so that child will be very like me, and his ability will be very powerful. When he said this kind of words, he was very calm and gentle, like a professor teaching. However, there wasn't the slightest trace of joy or popularity. Wei Bai couldn't help but laugh. You're so funny. I just asked you to think of a name. Do you think the child will look like you in the future? Zero's indifferent and deep eyes had a few more traces of gentleness. He looked at her, his voice low and hoarse. Then, what do you want to name him? The girl who was rolling around in his dream was casually and naturally leaning against his ear. This is the authority I gave to his father. Whoever becomes his father can name him. Her breath was so warm. Even the tip of Zero's ears, which had remained indifferent, turned slightly red. He stared at her without moving and finally sighed softly, I will give him a name before he is born. However, Wei Bai reached out her hand and lightly tapped his forehead. Her eyes were filled with beautiful sparkles, and her temperament was unbelievably gentle. You wish? I'll acknowledge whoever treats me well as my father. If you dare to treat me badly, I won't let you name it. She was flamboyant and reckless. However, there was no perverse hostility. Instead, it was gentle and presumptuous. It was a very strange and comfortable way of getting along. Zero was silent for a long time. His fingers moved and finally landed on the end of her hair. His fingers entwined with her long hair. It seemed to be entangled with her fate, unreasonable and with a trace of tenderness. Ding, De Wa's favorability is at 25. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.